SCP-5000. Gunshots echo down the concrete hallway of Site-22. Screams are the only thing that escape each room. A team of men in all black combat gear and masks move from one section of the complex to the next. Pietro Wilson hides in his office, listening to the cries for mercy of his colleagues. He shakes uncontrollably with fear. Who are they? He thinks. Why are they killing everyone? And how did they find us? Moments earlier, Pietro Wilson had been in the canteen eating dinner with other staff members. A group of heavily armed men entered the room. They stood silently surveying the area. One of the scientists stood up and asked if they could assist them. That's when the carnage started. One of the masked men raised his rifle and shot the scientist in the head. Chaos broke out as the other mercenaries raised their weapons and began firing. Bullets flew everywhere, and Pietro was lucky not to be struck or trampled as he escaped out the back door of the cafeteria. He ran to his office, slammed the door shut, and hid under his desk. Now he sits on the floor, with his legs pulled up to his chest, shaking uncontrollably. After a couple of minutes, he manages to take a deep breath and slows his heart rate. He regains control of his body, but is still filled with fear and adrenaline. Pietro crawls on his belly to his office door. He reaches up and pulls down on the handle. There's a slight click as the latch releases. He opens the door just a crack and peers out into the hallway. The flickering emergency lights illuminate the corridor for a few seconds at a time before plunging it back into darkness. There is no one in sight, but from around the corner, flashes of light from machine gun fire flickers down the hall. The screams of the workers at Site-22 are silenced. Pietro takes a deep breath and pushes the door open further. He crawls out of his office and starts moving away from the violence. Unfortunately, to get away from the mayhem, he must go deeper into the bowels of Site-22. The exit is the other way, but he is too scared to head towards the armed men. He stands up and brushes the dirt from his blue technician jumpsuit. The lights flicker off. The hallway goes dark. He reaches out his hands and comes into contact with the cool, damp wall. He feels his way down the corridor, swimming in darkness. After a few moments, the lights flicker back on. Pietro looks over his shoulder to make sure he is still in the clear. Standing at the end of the hall is a soldier dressed in all black with a mask covering his face. The soldier stands motionless. Pietro turns to face the soldier. His eyes open wide. His heart races. He can't breathe. The figure doesn't move. Then the lights flicker out again, and Pietro pushes off the wall and runs, blind in the darkness. He sprints as fast as he can when suddenly there's a loud crack and a bullet whizzes by his head. He can feel the wind as it barely misses his cheek. He continues to run. The lights flicker back on. He peers over his shoulder. Now there is an entire group of armed men pursuing him down the hallway, guns raised. He turns the corner of the hallway and proceeds down a set of stairs further into Site-22. At the bottom of the stairway, there is a short corridor with a door at the end of it. There's nowhere else to go. He pulls a key card out of his pocket and fumbles it. The card falls to the ground. Pietro bends down to pick it up, and as he leans over, a bullet whizzes past where his head had just been. The projectile embeds itself into the metal door. He scoops his keycard up off the ground and shoves it against the scanner. The door unlocks, and he dashes into the room. He quickly turns and shuts the door. It locks automatically. The last thing he sees is the assassins running towards the door. The lights flicker on in the room where Pietro stands. The room has only one door, no windows and no vents. It is completely isolated. In the middle of the room is SCP-5000. He knew there was an SCP in this room that was designated SCP-5000, but he never knew what it actually was. Here he is now, staring at it, a strange-looking mechanical harness hanging in the middle of the room. Suddenly, loud banging at the door fills the room. The armed men are trying to break in. It is only a matter of time before they pry the door open. With nowhere to go, Pietro Wilson knows that he is dead. He looks at SCP-5000 and shakes his head. "What do I have to lose?" he says out loud. "Only your life," a voice in his head responds. He walks over to SCP-5000 and pulls it down from where it is hanging. It is heavy. On the mechanical suit are symbols he does not recognize. The only thing he knows about the suit are rumors he's heard from others who work at Site-22. Supposedly, it first appeared in a flash of light in the containment chamber of a Keter-level SCP at Site-62C. The designation of this Keter was SCP-579. The only other thing that Pietro knows is that everyone at Site-62C was slaughtered when containment was breached. SCP-5000 was found deactivated next to a pile of bodies. He slips on the harness, and as if it has a life of its own, SCP-5000 begins to adjust itself to the exact dimensions of his body. The suit grows and snakes across his skin, wrapping every appendage in armor. Then it begins to tighten. Pietro Wilson starts to scream as SCP-5000 envelops him. The suit rises up the back of his neck and encases his entire head, silencing his screams. The door to the room blasts open from a controlled explosion. As the dust and smoke settles, the masked men enter the room. Their flashlights move from side to side as they search for the elusive technician who had just entered. There is no one in the room. All that is there is an empty rack in the middle of the chamber. The men fan out, but there is no other exit. The room is just a solid square of concrete. They're baffled. "Where did he go?" one of them shouts. Pietro Wilson had blacked out from the pain of the suit attaching to his body. He comes to, still standing in the middle of the room. All around him are men in black combat gear. They are searching for him. He holds his breath and closes his eyes, but the gunshots never come. He opens one of his eyes and looks around. "Why haven't they killed me yet?" he thinks. He slowly turns his head as men walk by him with their guns raised. He hears someone say, "Where did he go?" "I'm right here," he thinks. "Am I dead?" Pietro looks down to see that his entire body is contained within SCP-5000. He lifts his hand and waves it in front of his face. He is still clearly alive, but it seems as if the killers can't see him. He walks up to one of the mercenaries and waves his hand in front of the man's face. There is no reaction. "The suit made me invisible," he thinks. Pietro looks at one of the men to see if he can find out who they are and why they have killed everyone at the base. On the sleeve of the man's jacket are the words Zeta-19. He's never heard of Zeta-19 before, but they must be part of an organization that is trying to undermine the SCP Foundation. The men continue to search the empty room, clearly confused as to where the technician went. Pietro weaves his way through the group of men and back out the door he had entered from. On his way through the wreckage that used to be a door, Pietro Wilson trips on some debris. He reaches out to steady himself, but he is falling. He closes his eyes, knowing that as soon as he hits the ground, all of the men hunting him will be alerted by the sound of his fall. But the impact never comes. When Pietro opens his eyes, it is as if he is hovering just above the ground. He looks down at his feet. The toes of the suit are firmly planted on the floor, like powerful magnets on iron. SCP-5000 has prevented his fall and is holding him in place using the feet of the suit only. He reaches out his hand and gently places it on the ground. He pushes himself up to a standing position. He turns to look back into the room. The men are still in there searching for him. Pietro makes his way back through Site-22. He walks by his office and proceeds towards the exit of the facility. As he passes the labs and other rooms at Site-22, all he finds is carnage. Everyone has been killed. An extra bullet has been placed in each person's head to make sure. It seems that the only mission these men were on was to kill everyone and make sure they stayed dead. He continues towards the exit of Site-22 that is guarded by two men. As he approaches the two heavily armed men, Pietro makes sure to be as quiet as possible. This is not a difficult task, as the SCP-5000 has given him stealth capabilities. He notices that even his footsteps aren't giving off any sound. It is almost as if the suit is allowing him to glide across the floor. He is almost to the exit. Then he will be home free. He takes a deep breath, turns sideways, and squeezes past the two men guarding the doorway. Just as he is about to leave this nightmare behind, one of the guards turns unexpectedly. The man's shoulder runs directly into Pietro Wilson, throwing him off balance. He is knocked into the second guard. Both of the men scream, "What is that?" One of them shouts. They begin to raise their guns on the invisible object that just bumped into them. It's then that SCP-5000 takes over Pietro's body. The suit raises his arm and grabs one of the men by the throat. With a squeeze, the man's larynx is instantly crushed. Then the suit twists slightly and snaps the man's neck. It turns to face the second man. Even the black mask the man is wearing can't hide the look of terror on his face. But Pietro has no control over what SCP-5000 is doing. He has never killed before. The suit launches Pietro's body into the second man, pinning him against the wall. It then grabs the top of the mercenary's head and slams it against the concrete, again and again and again, until the man's screams are silenced. The suit lets go of the man, and his lifeless body slides to the ground as Pietro backs out. When he regains consciousness, he's outside of Site-22, standing on top of a hill, looking down at the facility below. He looks at his hands, then at the rest of his body. He is still contained within SCP-5000. There is a flash of light, and a heads-up display comes on. He doesn't recognize any of the symbols, but as his eyes move from one area of the screen to the next, the symbols become highlighted. Before his eyes, certain symbols began to translate into words he can read. One of the symbols now says, "Journal Entry." Unsure of what else to do, Pietro begins recounting what happened to him at Site-22. He makes his way through the desert towards the nearest SCP-Foundation safe house. He knows once there, he'll be able to reach out to his superiors for help and further orders. Maybe he can even find a way to get SCP-5000 to release him. As he trudges along, Pietro Wilson notices that his brain is telling him he is thirsty, but the vitals on the suit's heads-up display say that he is in good health. In fact, he is better than good. His vitals are all perfect. The suit seems to be giving him all the nutrients his body needs. It has even fixed his busted knee that was injured back in college playing football. The joint itself has somehow been healed. Pietro finally reaches the safe house and opens the door. It is quiet and dusty. It looks as if no one has been there in years. He walks over to the communication station and tries to contact the Foundation, but all he gets is static. He gives up and walks over to the TV. He pushes the on button. The screen hisses to life. What he sees causes his jaw to drop. SCPs had been let loose around the world and were killing people by the millions. What was going on? Pietro was startled awake from a nightmare. He was hyperventilating, but his body almost immediately recovered and his breathing slowed. A heads-up display flashed on in front of his eyes. Pietro Wilson was still contained within SCP-5000. The suit would not let him go. He instinctively went to rub his eyes, but the metal hands of the suit just clanked against the helmet that covered his head. He wanted out of this suit. Pietro stood up and walked over to the television. He reached out to turn it on, but paused. He thought, do I really want to see how bad things have gotten since I fell asleep? But he had to know. He was filled with dread as the TV came on and he saw the first images. The world looked as if it was ending, and it seemed like the SCP Foundation was responsible. How could this be? They were supposed to protect humanity, not destroy it. Pietro needed to uncover the truth behind what was happening. SCP-5000 had a log entry function that he could use to record everything he uncovered. Even if he didn't make it out of this alive, maybe one day someone would find the suit and be able to access what he had learned. The date of his first journal entry was February 1st, 2020. As Pietro watched the carnage unfold on TV, he began to put together the pieces of what he had witnessed himself. He knew a special ops squad had executed everyone at Site-22 where he worked. He knew that the SCPs had been let loose. He knew the world was ending. But why? As Pietro pondered this, a newscaster appeared. What you have just witnessed are reports from around the world of monsters ravaging cities and towns. This all started with a mysterious message from an organization that calls itself the SCP Foundation. Their ruling body, named the O5 Council, released the following statement. For those who are not currently aware of our existence, we represent the organization known as the SCP Foundation. Our previous mission centered around the containment and study of anomalous objects, entities, and other assorted phenomena. This mission was the focus of our organization for more than 100 years. Due to circumstances outside of our control, this directive has now changed. Our new mission will be the extermination of the human race. There will be no further communication. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The SCP Foundation had declared war on the human race. How could this be? What had led to the O5 Council changing their entire mission from protecting humanity to ending it? Could it be possible that a powerful SCP had taken control or influenced the Council's decision? Pietro turned on the radio, flipped through TV channels, and scoured the internet for information on what had happened over the past 24 hours. The first image he saw was a human-like creature with arms and legs twice as long as they should have been, with deep black eyes and a mouth curled up into a silent scream, showing teeth as sharp as razor blades. From the files he could access, Pietro learned that this was SCP-096, a creature that was docile until someone saw its face, at which point the SCP would start to shriek and cry before hunting down whoever saw its face and slaughtering them. He quickly changed the channel. The file said that even if SCP-096 was seen on a screen, it would find the viewer and tear them limb from limb. Surely that couldn't be true. There were potentially millions of people who had just seen it on TV. What would happen to them? What would happen to him? On the next channel was footage of a gigantic animal in the middle of the ocean. This was SCP-169, a leviathan from the Precambrian era. The creature was around 5,000 kilometers long and slowly swam just below the surface of the ocean. The feed suddenly changed to footage of devastating tsunamis and destruction caused by earthquakes. When SCP-169 had been awoken from its slumber by the Foundation detonating nukes on its back, it began trying to escape the danger. The movement of the massive creature caused natural disasters, destroying coastal communities around the world. On another channel, Pietro was watching as the Chancellor of Germany gave a speech, announcing that the country was declaring war on the SCP Foundation. Off camera, the sound of a tinkling bell could be heard. A man dressed as a Victorian-era butler entered and picked up a pen from the Chancellor's desk. He approached the Chancellor and raised the pen in the air as the camera cut away, but the sound of gunshots and yelling could be heard before the feed went dead. The news reported that similar events involving world leaders by the exact same butler had been occurring since the SCP Foundation changed its mission. Pietro searched through the suit's files to try and figure out what was happening, and found that SCP-662 must have been connected. Next was a strange skin disease plaguing New York and Delhi designated SCP-610 that covered its host in rashes and boils before seeking to take over their bodies. Finally, some good news though, as the outbreak looked to be contained by the combined efforts of the Global Occult Coalition and the Church of the Broken God. And then some bad news, as SCP-682 had also been released. A massive crocodilian monster, its sole mission was to destroy all life. It was fueled by hatred for living things, making it the perfect tool of the O5 Council's new stated mission. Pietro had heard rumors of SCPs that could instantly end the world, but clearly the Foundation hadn't gone down this route. Yet. Did they want to keep the rest of the planet intact? Or maybe there were holdouts in the SCP Foundation who were trying to stop the O5 Council from carrying out their mission. All Pietro knew was that right now, there were some real nasty SCPs running around, wreaking havoc. Pietro suddenly heard an explosion in the distance, far away, but still close enough to make him nervous. Maybe he was better off staying in the safe house and waiting out the apocalypse. The suit was keeping him healthy, nourished, and undetectable to foes. Any sane person would have remained there in seclusion and safety, but Pietro needed answers. He felt it was his responsibility to log and try to make sense of everything the SCP Foundation was doing. He brought up a map of SCP sites in the area on his display. The closest was Site 19. It was time to venture out into the end of the world and find some answers, but he was about to be faced with even more questions. On the way to Site 19, Pietro came across something strange. A squad of Foundation soldiers in a clearing. They were standing at attention as their commander paced back and forth, up and down the line. The soldiers' uniforms had the insignia MTF Epsilon 6 embroidered on them. The commander stopped in front of the first soldier in the line, clapped her hands and informed the soldier she would be beginning the check now. The commander pulled out a long knife and plunged it into the soldier's shoulder. Strangely, the soldier did not move, make a sound, or react in any way. She moved on to the next soldier and repeated the process. This continued on the line until she reached the 8th soldier. This time, when the commander stabbed the shoulder of the soldier, he noticeably winced and cried out in pain. The commander shouted, "Got a live one!" Pietro watched as the soldiers raised their guns and fired at the one who had cried out. He dropped to the ground. The commander moved on to the last soldier and put the knife in his shoulder. There was no reaction. "All right, we're clear," yelled the commander. "Let's move out." Pietro waited until the squad was out of sight and made his way to the corpse lying on the ground. He scavenged weapons and basic medical supplies. Then he buried the body and recorded what he had seen in SCP-5000's log. He had no idea why the soldier was killed, or why the others didn't feel pain. Maybe they weren't human at all. Maybe it was a squad of SCPs that had a human infiltrate their ranks. None of this makes sense, Pietro thought, before continuing on. Upon reaching Site 19, Pietro found it in disarray, and worse, practically all of the SCPs that were held at the site had breached containment. He was able to walk into the compound unnoticed, and deep in the facility he found scientists and researchers going about their business as if they had no idea what was happening out in the world. They must have been following the orders of the O5 Council. Pietro listened in on conversations about how to create the maximum number of human casualties, and which SCP should be released next. He felt a deep hatred for the people in the facility. How could they be so casual about wiping out humanity? As he observed more of the workers at Site 19, he noticed something strange. Everyone's eyes were cold and dead, like there was no humanity left in them. as if something had got to these scientists and removed the very souls from their bodies. Pietro stealthily stole a senior staff member's credentials and found an empty office where he could access logs from the facility to try to get a better idea of the timeline of events that led to the SCP Foundation's war on humanity. He logged into the mainframe and brought up the entries from the end of the previous year. He found that late in 2019, a project called Numa became of great interest to the 05 Council. From what Pietro could tell, the project had something to do with the collective human consciousness, also called the psychospace. Apparently, SCP researchers had a breakthrough in mapping out the psychospace. Unfortunately, many of the files had been redacted, and there was no way for Pietro to access the unredacted version. After Numa had been brought to the attention of the 05 Council, a series of orders were sent out to all senior staff and site directors, but frustratingly, these orders had also been redacted. All he could see was that after the orders were sent out, a wave of resignations were submitted across the Foundation. Suspiciously, a wave of suicides had also occurred at roughly the same time. What was in these orders? The 05 Council then sent out a number of files to all senior staff and site directors with instructions to disseminate the materials among those serving under them, after which both the resignations and deaths immediately ceased. Pietro searched everywhere for what was in those files, but like so much of the SCP database, this information had been redacted as well. What was clear was that the SCP Foundation had begun gearing up for the extermination of humanity the following year. The entry log for February 1st, 2020 read, "Mobile task forces are dispatched to all exclusionary sites to execute all personnel. Immediately following the conclusion of these missions, the Foundation declares war on humanity." This was where Pietro Wilson's journey had started. He slammed his hands down on the computer monitor in frustration. The suit absorbed all of the impact and crushed the monitor in half. Pietro moved to a new non-smash computer and logged in again. This time he brought up the most current entries to see what the 05 Council was up to recently, to see if there were some answers in the present. The SCP Foundation had been busy while he was making his way to Site-19. They had released SCP-1048 in Paris, which now led a horde of bears down the Champs-Élysées. In the distance, Pietro thought he could almost make out a massive red teddy bear walking between the buildings. The SCP Foundation was also launching counterattacks on any organization that tried to oppose them. They used SCP-1290 to hurl projectiles at the Global Occult Coalition's base. They were also using SCP-1440 to brainwash people and convince them that they needed to riot. This caused widespread destruction as people panicked and were trampled to death. Pietro thought it was sad that such a kind-looking old man could cause so much destruction. He recorded as much as he could before deciding that it was time to get out of Site-19. Although SCP-5000 still made him undetectable, he couldn't shake the feeling that the lifeless eyes of the staff were beginning to look his way more and more often. As Pietro exited Site-19, the sky glowed orange with the fires of countless burning buildings. He needed to find more answers. He needed to uncover the reason the SCP Foundation was trying to wipe out humanity. He had learned a lot from Site-19 and was sure that if he could just get to the next site, he would finally be able to figure out the Foundation's motive and maybe even how to stop them. He took a step forward, but his heads-up display suddenly went completely dark. The suit constricted tighter around his body, slowing the blood flow to his brain. He couldn't move as his vision got dimmer and dimmer and dimmer until he blacked out. "What happened?" Pietro says out loud as he looks at his vitals in the heads-up display of SCP-5000. He is still contained within the exclusionary suit that makes him undetectable to human senses. He checks the date and gasps in surprise. 3 months? I've been passed out for 3 months? He stands up and looks across the barren landscape. The screen inside the suit indicates that he has traversed half of the country since he left Site-19 3 months ago. Pietro looked down at one of his hands. He is holding a leather briefcase. Where did that come from? He wonders. Pietro has no idea what is inside the briefcase, but he knows it definitely isn't round. He tries to let go. His fingers won't open. He uses his other hand to try and pry the briefcase away from himself, but his hand only clasps to it harder. Then a wave of calm washes over him. Something inside his head speaks to him, but it's not a voice, more like a feeling. It is a sense of purpose, and Pietro's new mission in life is to deliver this briefcase to SCP-579. Nothing else is as important. Pietro Wilson takes a deep breath and embraces his new purpose in life. He still wants to uncover the reason that the SCP Foundation is trying to wipe out humanity, but this will have to wait until he delivers the briefcase to SCP-579. Pietro doesn't know exactly where 579 is located, but he can feel a pull in a certain direction, so he begins to walk. Pietro brings up the information stored in the SCP-5000 suit from the Foundation's database. He finds that all information about what SCP-579 is has been expunged from the record. The only useful information in the file is that the Keter-level SCP is located at Site-62C. At least Pietro has a destination to aim for. He travels for days without seeing a living soul, but he does pass thousands of corpses. He tries to ignore them, but one stands out to him inside a house as he searches for supplies. It's the body of a recently deceased boy. He couldn't have been more than 8 years old. He was so young, Pietro thinks. He bends over to scoop up the body and bury it outside. As his hand touches the body, the boy's skin begins to move. It is as if hundreds of tiny creatures are scurrying just under the skin. Then, from out of every orifice comes hundreds of little pale worms, each with the face of the boy. They are all cackling as they crawl out of the boy's body and into a drain a few feet away. Pietro jumps back and runs. This is the last person I try to bury, he thinks. Pietro pushes forward, the hundreds of little laughing worms haunting his thoughts, until he puts a significant distance between himself and the little boy's body. Pietro continues to walk towards the direction of Site-62C. He passes more corpses, but decides to stay clear of them. Although the suit makes it so Pietro doesn't need to rest, he can only go so fast. He enters a small, abandoned town that looks like something out of an old Western movie. A tumbleweed blows across the dirt road. Pietro sits on the wooden step of the local saloon and takes a break. He looks down at the briefcase in his hand. He hasn't had the urge to open it, only to deliver it to SCP-579. Pietro puts the briefcase on his lap. He stares at it and slides his hands along the leather, stops with his thumb on the latch, and pushes. The locks snap open. Pietro opens the briefcase. A bright light beams out, and he passes out. When Pietro comes to again, he is miles closer to Site-62C. There is a warm feeling enveloping his body. He looks down at the briefcase, which is now closed. Wow, this thing is like my own personal skip button, Pietro thinks. He holds up the briefcase, unlatches the locks, sees the bright light, and passes out again. He awakes once again miles away from his last position. So it wasn't just a one-off effect. Pietro continues walking across the country, switching between using his own legs and whatever magic is contained within the briefcase. He is making faster progress now. As he walks through a dense, deciduous forest, he comes across a pack of wolves eating the remains of an SCP agent. Pietro is undetectable to the wolves thanks to the SCP-5000 suit, and he makes his way over to the pack, quietly grabbing a laptop laying on the ground next to the agent's body. Pietro takes the laptop and goes away deeper into the forest before stopping to boot up the computer. He has not forgotten about the horrors the SCP Foundation has released, and he needs to know how the world has been doing over the last few months. What he finds is not good. The SCP Foundation has triggered the eruption of Yellowstone, destroying SCP-5000, which, unknown to Pietro, contained the failsafe for rebuilding human society in the event of a world-ending scenario, which this was starting to look more and more like. It was only a matter of time now before the soot and ash thrown up by the eruption blocks out the sun in much of what is left of the United States. The Foundation has also found a way to get SCP-2241 to do their dirty work at refugee camps. The young brown-haired boy is most likely being manipulated by the Foundation under the pretense that they are only doing what is best for their child. He has caused whole groups of refugees to turn on each other, leading to a massacre. The last entry says that the young boy is being sent to the Global Occult Coalition holdout in Ganzir to help destroy some of the last threats to the SCP Foundation. A series of other SCPs have been dispatched by the Foundation around the world to continue the destruction of humanity. They even managed to use temporal anomalies to make it Christmas time everywhere around the world. So SCP-4666, the brutal Yuletide creature that stalks the homes of children, is free to cause chaos. Pietro had seen enough. He slams the laptop shut, throws it against the trunk of a tree, and opens the briefcase again. He awakes, standing feet away from a group of Global Occult Coalition soldiers who are sitting around a campfire. Maybe they know why the SCP-Foundation is trying to end the world, he thinks. He decides that it is too risky to show himself to the soldiers, but takes some solace in sitting around the campfire with other living humans. The soldiers are sharing stories about what is happening. One catches the attention of Pietro Wilson. It is strange, but also may hold a clue as to why the SCP-Foundation is trying to wipe out humanity. One of the soldiers recounts an event that he witnessed before leaving the Global Occult Coalition's headquarters at Genzir. They had just captured an SCP soldier trying to break into the base. The infiltrator's name was Samuel Ross. He had been strapped into an interrogation chair and questioned. The interviewers were not getting anywhere until Ross was threatened with torture. To which he responded, "Do what you want. Once you realize you're not supposed to feel pain, there's nothing to be afraid of anymore." Pietro sits up straight and starts to listen more intently. He remembers stumbling across SCP soldiers on his way to Site-19 that exhibited the same no-pain mentality that this Samuel Ross seems to have. After that odd statement by Samuel Ross, there was the sound of wind. It started slow at first, then ramped up until it was howling like a hurricane. That's when the screaming started. The screams became louder and climbed to a higher pitch. Then the room went dead silent. The last thing that Samuel Ross said was,
"Look what you've done to yourselves. I told you you wouldn't like it, didn't you? That's why you hear your voice. But you wanted to know so badly. I really liked you guys, so I was trying to be nice. We're so kind to you, you know. We fight in the light, so you can die in the dark." Disgusting.
Pietro sits back on his haunches and rocks back and forth. He has an ominous feeling that there is a connection between the missing pain of the SCP soldiers and the reason why the Foundation declared war on humanity. The soldier who told the story of Samuel Ross stands up. "After that interview is when the destruction of Genzir started from the inside. It is why the Global Occult Coalition is no more. God help us all." The soldier finished with his story, turns from the others and starts to walk away. As the soldier makes his way towards the woods, Pietro can just barely make out that he's taken his pistol from its holster before he disappears into the darkness. The world truly has gone mad. Pietro opens the briefcase and blacks out. Pietro sluggishly continues his walk. He's moving down a rocky path in the middle of the forest, and his will to keep going is slowly being drained. The only reason he has not sat down and given up is because of the driving urge to get the briefcase to 579. He wants so badly to concentrate and discover the reason that the Foundation released the SCPs on humanity, but the need to reach 579 won't let him focus on anything else. He's noticed though that every time he opens the briefcase to skip ahead, he makes less and less progress. The warm feeling of the first few transports has been replaced by a nauseated headache every time he comes out of the trance. Pietro exits the forest into an open field. The wind blows across the high grass looking like green waves, and standing scattered throughout the field are statues. As Pietro approaches, he sees that they are statues of Mobile Task Force Foundation soldiers. He slowly walks closer to the white marble statues. He reaches the first one and looks at the face of the frozen soldier. His eyes have been scooped out. All that remains are black, empty sockets. The arms of the soldier have been carved into blades, like a praying mantis. He walks past the first statue and proceeds to the next one, where he hears something move in the grass behind him. He spins around to look at the statue. He could have sworn it was in a slightly different position. No, that's crazy, Pietro thinks. He continues to the next statue. It is another carving of an MTF soldier. No eyes, blades for arms. This is really creepy, Pietro says aloud. He proceeds through the field. He walks up a slight hill and turns around to look at the field of statues. What he sees is terrifying. The statues have all moved and are now in different positions. It appears as if they were slashing through the area looking for something or someone. Pietro continues over the hill and comes upon a group of refugees. They are picking through the field looking for food to eat. A fog begins to move in. It is being swept across the meadow by the wind. Pietro watches from a distance as the fog envelops the small group. Suddenly there is screaming and the sound of blades going through flesh. The screams cease almost immediately. Pietro runs down the hill to where the refugees were. The fog lifts. The group of people have been cut to pieces. Standing in the middle of the carnage is one of the MTF soldier statues, blood dripping from its blade arms. Pietro knows what to do. He runs. After a few miles, Pietro slows to catch his breath. Those statues must have been created by the Foundation, he thinks. It's as if they are frozen in place. But as soon as you take your eyes off them, they can move with killer speed. Even in the suit, my eyesight can stop them, but they can't see me. They must know I'm there though, since they can't move. Pietro Wilson opens the briefcase once again, for what he didn't know would be the last time. When he comes to this time, he is near Site-62C. He can feel himself being pulled stronger than ever in the direction of his destination. He walks down a deserted road past the husks of burnt vehicles, and at the end is the gate to Site-62C. There are no guards or security of any kind. It looks like the site has been abandoned for a long time, and the gate is wide open, beckoning Pietro Wilson into Site-62C, where SCP-579 waits. Pietro Wilson enters the dark hallway he somehow knows leads down into the crypt of Site-62C. The walls drip with what he hopes is water from leaking pipes, but it has a metallic smell, and is much too red to actually be water. He begins to feel nauseous. It gets harder to breathe. Even the SCP-5000 suit can't keep him calm. He turns and runs back up the stairs out of Site-62C. Pietro begins to sob uncontrollably, as the memories of everything that has happened over the past several months suffocates his will to go on. Then, as if an invisible force that refuses to let him go takes control, Pietro feels as if a gun has been shoved into the small of his back. He is being sent back into Site-62C, whether he wants to go or not. He is unsure if what is forcing him back into the base is inside the briefcase, his own uncontrollable urge to know what is going on, or SCP-579 itself, but he cannot stop himself from re-entering the doorway and proceeding into Site-62C. He doesn't know what SCP-579 looks like, but Pietro has a sinister feeling that it is watching him. He reaches the bottom of the stairway and proceeds down a dark hallway. The power went out a long time ago, and the only light in the depths of Site-62C is the dim glow coming from the helmet of the SCP-5000 suit. Pietro notices long gashes along the concrete walls, as if someone took a giant knife and dragged it from one end of the hallway to the other. There is something at the end of the corridor that Pietro can't make out. As he gets closer, the lights on the SCP-5000 suit begin to flicker. The thing at the end of the hallway seems to move slightly each time the lights on the suit dim. The lights on the suit go out completely, and the entire hallway is plunged into darkness. Only for a second though, and when the lights come back on, a statue of an MTF soldier looms over Pietro. Its eyes are empty sockets, its lips are turned up in a snarl, the arms have been filed into blades. No! Pietro screams. He dodges around the statue. The moment it is out of his sight, he hears the sound of blades on concrete. As the statue of the soldier comes to life and begins slashing its way down the hallway, it cannot see Pietro, but it knows he is there. It slashes all around, trying to connect with whoever is there with it. Pietro runs to the end of the hallway and reaches the door. He presses against the heavy metal door to open, straining against its weight, all while the blind statue is still slashing, coming closer and closer. The door is almost open, but then Pietro feels a blade lacerate the back of the suit, cutting deeply into the skin of his back, missing his spinal cord by millimeters. Another blade enters through the back of his shoulder, piercing straight through. He somehow pulls himself through the cracked doorway and kicks the metal door shut behind him. He can hear the banging and scraping of blades outside the metal door. The creature has not given up and is trying to break in. Pietro turns around to see he is in an observation chamber full of instruments and screens. Blood runs down his back from the wounds inflicted by the statue. He walks slowly over to the window. On the desk in front of him is a file labeled SCP-579. He looks through the observation glass and down into the chamber below. It is too dark to make anything out, but Pietro can feel that SCP-579 is down there looking up at him. Pietro looks to his left and sees a hole in the floor. He walks over and looks down. leads right into the containment chamber of 579. "Let's get this over with," Pietro says out loud. He holds the briefcase over the hole and tries to open his hand. His finger won't budge. SCP-579 wants him to hand-deliver the briefcase. Pietro Wilson takes a deep breath, closes his eyes, and steps into the opening of the hole. He falls. In the moments before he lands in SCP-579's containment chamber, something comes to him. He realizes that he isn't going to be a hero. He isn't going to figure out why the SCP Foundation is trying to wipe out humanity, and he isn't going to survive. He lands hard on the ground below. It is completely dark, except for a shadow that moves in the corner of the containment chamber. Pietro Wilson creates one last log. "If anyone ever reads this, please figure out why. Explain it to me. Someone. Anyone. I don't get it. I just don't get it." SCP-579 steps into the glow that the SCP-5000 suit is giving off. Pietro Wilson looks up at it. "Oh, so that's how it is," he says before SCP-5000 creates its final log. Life signs, lost. Vital signs, lost. SCP-5000 appeared in a flash of light in the containment chamber of SCP-579, located in Site-62C. The researchers monitoring SCP-579 had no idea where the suit came from, or why it contained the body of Pietro Wilson, a Foundation employee who is assigned to Site-06 and is very much alive. Wilson appears to have no knowledge of SCP-5000, or memories of the events logged in SCP-5000's databanks. Although the suit is believed to have been capable at one point of a number of anomalous functions and abilities, the damage it has sustained has rendered it inoperable, except for the storage of data files, which now have been archived and stored on secure Foundation servers. But is that really the case? The fact is, the tale of Pietro Wilson and SCP-5000 is one of the most complex and mysterious events in the SCP universe. You've got questions, and we've got answers. Why Pietro? What was in the briefcase? What exactly happened at the end of the story? And perhaps most importantly of all, why did the SCP Foundation abandon their mission and make destroying all of humanity their new primary directive? Whenever you're dealing with splintered realities and mind-melting nightmares, there's bound to be a number of interpretations, and we're eager to explain one of the more popular ones right here. Soon you'll know it all, but to find out, we need to start at the beginning. Our hero, Foundation employee Pietro Wilson, was going about his day at exclusionary Site-06. However, normal operations were interrupted when a mobile task force turned Foundation hit squad stormed in and began executing employees left and right as part of their wider plan to wipe out humanity. Pietro got lucky though, and managed to find SCP-5000, making him undetectable to the invading MTF squad. This brings us to our first question. Why Pietro? And how does killing Foundation staff help advance the O5 Council's goal of overthrowing humanity? The answer to both questions has everything to do with the site that Pietro and his co-workers were at when the attack went down, Exclusionary Site-06. Exclusionary sites are a very special kind of Foundation site that utilizes the same technology as the Scranton Box, a container used to protect important items from reality warpers, but on a far more ambitious scale. Because of the use of this technology, these exclusionary sites are essentially resistant to CK-class restructuring scenarios and temporal anomalies. Those are where reality and/or history itself are changed by a powerful entity. This makes them a perfect location for, say, staff wanting to stage a revolt when their leaders have decided to wipe out humanity. The Foundation wished to eliminate the personnel stationed at these protected sites as a precautionary measure, before moving on to the main phase of their plan. But this attack was just one part of the Foundation's wider scheme to purge their ranks of dissenters before putting their final mission into place. In order to make sure there were no internal threats left who could pose a threat to the new main directive, the Foundation murdered all the staff at exclusionary sites, hunted down and assassinated any resigned employees, and killed off any humanoid or human-sympathetic SCPs, leaving no one who could stop them. Or at least, they thought there was no one left. While all of this was happening, Pietro suited up and exited the site. So, why Pietro? because he got lucky and he happened to stumble upon SCP-5000. He wasn't the chosen one, nor was he in any way exceptional, beyond his willingness to see his quest for answers through to the bitter end. Pietro really could have been any of us if we were in his situation. When Pietro escaped, he found the world in disarray. SCPs had been released on a global scale, destroying infrastructure, massacring civilians, and assassinating key political figures. The Foundation had even gone public, for the first time ever, with their new intentions: destroy all humans. Pietro decided to head to Site-19 and get to the bottom of their madness. On his way there, he saw a group of Mobile Task Force members performing a bizarre stabbing ritual to see who among them could feel pain. Remember this, it'd be important later. Like a lot of the small moments in the story of SCP-5000, these are puzzle pieces that can be fit together to create the true picture of what's happening out of the chaos. At Site-19, among the dead-eyed Foundation workers plotting mass killings, Pietro found a treasure trove of vital information. There he learned about the existence of Project Pneuma, an O5 Council-approved initiative to map out the human psychosphere, otherwise known as the collective unconscious. He also found a redacted unanimous vote from the O5 Council and Ethics Committee, as well as a redacted series of directives sent out to senior staff and site directors, which caused a wave of suicides and resignations. During his search, Pietro also discovered a second series of directives sent out to the remaining site directors and senior staff, including the phrase, "Harden your heart." These directives are known to some as the Cure. While Pietro didn't have the context to put all this together yet, these are more vital clues to what happened. The Pneuma Project is what incited the Foundation's motivation to destroy humanity. Killing off humans is actually secondary to eliminating something else that's hiding within the human psychosphere. Again, that's the collective unconsciousness of all humans. The O5 Council and the Ethics Committee were unanimous in their approval of this project, which was like deciding to burn down a house to kill the inhabitants inside. Except in this scenario, humanity is the house. So who or what exactly is the inhabitant? You'll find that out soon. The next thing Pietro knew, he was sitting halfway across the country with no memory of the previous 3 months. He was also carrying a briefcase with no knowledge of what was inside except that it was not round. He also had a strange compulsion to deliver the briefcase to SCP-579 for reasons he didn't fully understand. But he hoped that doing so would lead him to some answers. Pietro may not have known what he was holding, but we do. The clue here is not round, which is the only confirmed fact about SCP-055, also known as the anti-meme. This is an SCP with the primary anomalous property of literally being unknowable. People who observe it forget what they observed and have no memory of even looking at 055 in the first place. This is why the briefcase was able to act as Pietro's personal skip button. Pietro was physically covering the distance he traveled, but every time he opened the briefcase and looked at SCP-055, he forgot that period of time, making it seem as though he simply skipped forwards. The thing he was skipping towards, SCP-579, is an equally mysterious and highly dangerous SCP contained within Site-62C. Nobody even really knows what 579 is, only that it's an anomaly so dangerous that the entirety of Site-62C was built to contain it. So what's so important about bringing these two together? That, and the vital importance of Pietro's final mission, will become clear very soon. Pietro continued his journey with the briefcase, encountering more horrors and countless deaths upon the way. He finally found some solace in coming across a group of Global Occult Coalition soldiers, discussing the interrogation of a captured member of Foundation staff named Samuel Ross. 2 quotes from Ross's enigmatic speech are of particular interest here. The first, in response to the threat of torture, was,
"Do what you want. Once you realize you're not supposed to feel pain, there's nothing to be afraid of anymore."
The second, after witnessing the death of his captors, was,
"Look what you've done to yourselves. I told you you wouldn't like it, didn't you? That's why you hear your voice, but you wanted to know so badly. I really liked you guys, so I was trying to be nice. We're so kind to you, you know. We fight in the light, so you can die in the dark. Disgusting.
Do these quotes sound a little familiar? The first because, as Pietro himself recalled, the MTF members getting stabbed earlier also didn't seem to feel pain. The second, because describing people as disgusting is an adjective favored by another infamous SCP, SCP-682. This brings us back to the Cure, the document disseminated by the O5 Council, instructing people to harden their hearts. Whatever the Foundation discovered in the human psychosphere, it's apparently the cause of all pain, and hence, when the Foundation discovered it, they were able to train themselves out of pain. And as for the SCP-682 reference, this is a being that despises life, and it's believed by some that the reason 682 holds this belief is that it's always known about whatever the Foundation recently discovered through Project Pneuma. Decrypted text logs in the Foundation files confirm this in a document exchange between O5-1 and Tejani, the head of the Foundation Ethics Committee. In their conversation, they confirmed the existence of the Cure, which deprived the personnel of everything from pain to empathy, being disseminated among staff prior to the massacre, and of the Foundation's sudden ideological alignment with SCP-682. And they found something else too, referred to simply as it. Whatever it was the reason Foundation Command decided to wipe out humanity. But what is it? What could possibly be so bad it was worth killing all of humanity? Perhaps most surprising of all is that Pietro ran into the creature's physical manifestation, and he barely even considered it, due to being occupied by avoiding the attacks of the statue-like mantis arm blinkers. Pietro made an entry in his log though, describing the strange entity, describing it like a person stretched out, like the space around them was stretched out and they were being stretched along with it. Their body went from the ground up to the clouds and their jaws swung at right angles. There were these gaps as well, black gaps in the space around its body, like wings. Foundation staff were fighting it, shooting at this strange entity, but their weapons had no effect. This creature, this it, is a being that inhabits the human psychosphere, meaning it exists within the minds of all humans on some level, driving and manipulating them to mysterious ends. What can it do? What does it want? It seems that the only people who know are the O5 Council and the Foundation Ethics Committee who were privy to the Pneuma report. But whatever it was they saw, they believed it was worth killing off all of humanity just to stop it. As indicated by the unanimous vote from the Ethics Committee, omnicide was a more ethical choice compared to the alternative. The influence of it was also likely what gave Pietro the strong subconscious desire to unite the briefcase containing SCP-055 with SCP-579, even at the cost of his own life. This brings us to our final question. Why was it so important to unite SCP-055 and SCP-579? And what did this act serve to achieve? As Pietro, wounded by the blinkers and lingering on the edge of death, finally delivered the briefcase into 579's containment chamber, he acknowledged the fact that he was no hero. But that's where Pietro was wrong. After the destruction of SCP-5000, Pietro was in control of one of the only remaining ways to save the world. The combination of the anomalous effects of 055 and 579, as laid out in Rajit's proposal and the article for SCP-2998, is the Foundation's ultimate trump card for preventing an XK-class end-of-the-world scenario. If the two are united during said scenario, the universe resets to a time before the XK-class scenario began and prevents it from happening. In this case, Pietro united the two, creating a new reality where the Pneuma project was never launched, and it was never discovered, thereby averting the apocalypse. The corpse of poor dead Pietro and the highly damaged SCP-5000 suit he wore were the only evidence that this alternate reality ever existed. This means that the collaboration between Pietro Wilson and the suit he just happened to stumble upon quite literally saved the universe as we know it from a Foundation that had gone rogue. In this regard, he's one of the greatest heroes the universe has ever known, even if his actions weren't entirely his own. After all, he got a helping hand from the suit, and another from it, who still lurks in all our minds, mercifully undiscovered to this day. What was its grand plan, or purpose that triggered all the madness? Anyone who ever knew for sure resides in a universe that no longer exists, and we can only hope that a history that never happened is somehow unable to repeat itself in ours. The little boy ran through the twisted, bombed-out streets, dodging debris and craters. He was dirty, dressed in filthy rags, with tears creeping down his cheeks. Hot on his tail were SCP-Foundation field agents. Why? Because he just witnessed the same SCP-Foundation agents chasing him murder his entire family right in front of him. And now, they were looking to finish the job.
If that kid escapes, none of you make it home!
The commander of the group barked as the boy disappeared into some tall grass. Ever since the world as they knew it disappeared, changed with the horrible arrival of the Foundation and all the monsters they released upon the Earth, everything had fallen into ruins. The boy and his family had been lucky to survive this long, but all luck runs out eventually. Will the boy's luck last long enough for him to escape the tall grass, while a horde of trained killers with advanced weapons and tactics followed him? Well, what do you think his odds are, dear viewer? Bullets ripped through the grass as the agents unloaded, hoping they might hit the kid by accident. By some miracle, every bullet missed. However, every time the shots rang out, terrible memories bounced around the boy's head. How the Foundation agents found the dilapidated building where he and his family had been hiding. How they entered, guns drawn, and demanded that they all line up and get on their knees if they wanted to live. Of course, it was a lie. With one shot each, the boy's family's killers moved down the line, executing them all. The boy's skinny, malnourished wrists managed to slide out of the zip ties before the wave of violence washing over his family also claimed him. After all the terrible things that they'd seen, after everything they had heard over the last few months, after all the horrors, it seemed unimaginable that the agents of their death would be something as mundane as mere human beings with conventional weapons. The things that had happened to others, well, the little boy could scarcely have imagined it in his deepest, darkest nightmares. For so many computers around the world, a terrible face flashed on people's screens. A gaunt, white, screaming face bereft of hair with blank eyes. To the people old enough to remember, it might have seemed like one of the pop-up screamers of the 2000s. A little unsettling, sure, but harmless. This wasn't, though. Everyone who saw it, whether it took minutes or hours, heard a terrible screaming and wailing coming towards them. Then a monstrous creature, a stretched parody of a man, naked and emaciated, smashed through the wall, claws and teeth outstretched in unknowable fury. When it was done killing them, there wasn't even anything left to bury. But the world of burials, of funerals, of the respected dead was about to come to an end anyway. Mushroom clouds rose across the oceans. Nobody was sure who exactly fired the nukes, but in addition to distributing deadly radioactive fallout through the skies, it woke something great and terrible beneath the ocean. A monster thousands of miles long, an underwater behemoth, a biblical leviathan, and its shuddering rocked the world in the most terrible ways imaginable. Earthquakes shattered and swallowed whole cities. Coastal settlements were quickly consumed by raging tsunamis, walls of water that let none escape alive. As the chaos started to unfold, world leaders, just as confused as anybody else about what was happening here, took to the airwaves to try to comfort their panicked citizens. Leaders all across the globe made broadcasts, saying that their armies, intelligence agencies, and emergency services were all trying to get the matter under control. But that's when another terrifying thing began to happen. A man dressed in the black garb of an old-fashioned English butler started appearing in the backgrounds of the broadcasts, somehow having completely slipped past security. And in doing so, he effortlessly began assassinating heads of state. By gun, by knife, by garrote wire. Bye-bye. The very structure of the world's nations was being rewritten by this terrifying assassin, who'd often be gunned down by security forces as soon as he'd completed his task. And the most strange and frightening part was that the man in each broadcast, the man dressed as a butler, seemed to be the exact same man. But the civilian population could hardly even stop to worry about their fallen leaders. Major cities from New York to Delhi were suddenly hit by multiple simultaneous outbreaks of the most infectious and terrifying pathogen ever known, SCP-5000, also known as the flesh that hates. Anyone infected started first by breaking out into a terrible full-body rash, soon developing into huge boils and lesions and overgrowing diseased skin. After that, they went from pitiful, sick, disfigured humans to terrible monsters. Extra limbs, extra eyes, extra mouths, grasping tentacles covered in fingers and teeth. Cronenbergian horrors beyond full comprehension or description, with only one motivation in mind: to hunt down and infect others with their glorious and terrible disease. As crowds screamed and ran, the infected leapt out to capture and convert them. The only thing that stopped them from killing even more people was the intrusion of unknown tactical soldiers, whose shoulders had patches reading GOC. They flew in, backed up by cyborgs who possessed advanced weaponry that seemed to drive back those who'd become among the swelling numbers of the flesh that hates. Not everyone was lucky enough to have a savior. In the little boy's town, a once beautiful and idyllic place where he and his family had settled not long ago, a monster soon came rampaging. It was a ginormous reptile, huge and terrifying, with claws and teeth that could effortlessly rip through buildings. But it was no mere beast. The creature was fast, adaptive, and extremely intelligent. It ripped through the larger buildings quickly, hunting down and devouring the screaming humans within, then began stalking the ruined suburbs.
Where are you hiding?
The monster rasped in a deep, guttural growl.
I smell you amongst the rock and rubble of your lives. I smell your fear. It smells disgusting.
The boy and his family hid away as best they could, but the terrible monster's words were no idle threat. Soon the wood and brickwork that guarded them was torn away. They were staring into the dripping maw of the beast, death and despair feeling more familiar than they had ever felt before.
Scream as you die,
the monster said.
At least then you can serve a purpose as dinner-time entertainment.
They all did as they were told and screamed. The monster, satisfied, reared back and prepared to lunge at them, delivering what would surely be a death blow. Then, at the last possible second, a flash of orange struck the creature in the face. It stumbled backwards, stunned, as the orange seemed to crawl all over its body, chirping and cooing. The little boy could just about see. It looked like a blob of orange slime, sticking to the monster's scales, slithering all over it. He could feel some kind of energy radiating off of the slime even at this distance. It felt like warmth, light, happiness, hope, and the scaly monster absolutely despised it.
No! Get off me, you worthless little wretch!
It yelled, though its voice had already started breaking into involuntary laughter.
No! Stop it! You're no brother of mine! Abomination! Disgusting!
It was unable to resist the peals of laughter, soon falling on its side to cackle at intense volumes. The little boy and his family somehow knew what was happening here. The little orange creature was helping them, buying them time. Now was their chance to run. And run they did, away from their home, their life, as the world they knew crumbled and cracked beneath them. It sent them hurtling through the dark into a terrible new definition of normal, one filled with chaos, pain, fear, and horror. In the few places that the news still ran, it ran as a parade of impossible nightmares. Paris, France had been invaded by gangs of murderous teddy bears. Their leader was a giant red bear stomping through the city. On closer inspection, its massive form was comprised of thousands of dead Parisians, their corpses fused together by the countless smaller bears swarming around it, spreading violence and chaos wherever they went. Refugee camps were set up for the ones fleeing towns and cities where horror reigned. These were set up by the same groups that had helped fight off the flesh that hates in all the major cities. But the Foundation still had other weapons up their sleeves. A mobile task force transported a particularly dangerous anomaly, SCP-1440, an old Middle Eastern man whose mere presence causes death and destruction to human life from camp to camp. While he wept for the damage he caused, thousands died. It was much more efficient than one of the Foundation's more common methods, simply gunning down running people as they saw them with brutal efficiency, just like the fate that would later befall the poor little boy's family in the Comprise safe house. But there were far greater atrocities to unleash before that small tragedy could even unfold. From every available location, the Foundation's nightmare, SCP-3199, was being airdropped in the form of grotesque eggs. Upon landing, they would hatch, birthing swarms of self-replicating man-chicken abominations that attacked any actual human on sight. An encounter that 9 times out of 10 ended in a horrific death. And after that, they would just keep breeding and spreading. Temporal anomalies were also used to change the date, technically making every day Christmas Day. Normally, Christmas every day might seem as a nice thing. English glam rock band Wizard even made a song about the possibilities in 1985. But in this case, it had the horrifying side effects of allowing SCP-4666, the Yule Man, to operate all year round. Trust us when we say that if given the choice, you would choose to be killed by literally any other anomaly than have a run-in with the Yule Man. Hundreds, if not thousands, of families were about to suffer slow, drawn-out deaths at the hand of this ancient, gnarled sadist. Unlike most of the other anomalies listed here, the Yule Man does not just kill, he savors it. He stalks, tortures, and eventually slaughters his victims, or worse, drags them back to his twisted workshop. There they help craft his nightmarish toys until their strength fails, and then they become the toys. The little boy had no way of knowing this, but the Foundation's humanoid anomalies who weren't sociopathic killers were actually the first victims of this new rampage, along with any other anomalies who might be viewed as holding inconvenient sympathies towards the human race. In all of this, only one of the kind anomalies had been able to escape. When a Foundation executioner entered the cell of SCP-999, the Tickle monster, he raised his weapon and prepared to fire, but he couldn't do it. He felt the wave of compassion from the adorable orange blob wash over him. How could he possibly try to kill something that was a true force for good like that? No, he couldn't do it. He needed to keep the spark of hope alive in this dark new world, even if it was only because it's what it wanted him to do. He opened the cell and told SCP-999 to get out of there as fast as he could. There would be so many people out there who needed his help. He might even be the one who could save this broken, terrible world from the horrors that the SCP Foundation had unleashed upon it. SCP-999 slithered like the wind through the containment site towards the door. The agent who had a change of heart and freed him wasn't so lucky. A Foundation sniper on an upper floor noticed his act of kindness, and instead saw it as an act of weakness. He lined up the man's head between his crosshairs and fired, dropping him on the spot. But his sacrifice would not have been in vain. He freed humanity's last hope from what otherwise might have been certain doom. SCP-999 said by certain prophecies to be the ultimate source for good in the universe. But could that good truly flourish when the source of the greatest evil was the SCP Foundation itself? That brings us back to where we started. An orphan boy, his family destroyed, running through the tall grass as armored men with assault rifles followed him. As he ran, he felt all his pain welling up, all his grief, all the aches and exhaustions in his body from surviving, not living. He's going through what no child should ever go through, but millions still do in the endless churn of the new world, just like the old. But as the tall grass gave way, the boy saw something awful. A half-decimated brick wall, but still too tall to climb. He was boxed in, with his soon-to-be killers on his heels already. The little boy backed into the wall and turned to see the Foundation death squad emerging from the tall grass, not a hint of hesitation in their stance. "It's for your own good, kid," the point man said. "For everyone's good in the end." They squeezed the triggers on their assault rifles and let loose. But in a flash of orange, too fast for anyone in attendance to comprehend, the little boy was pulled out of the firing line. The same blob that had saved him once before had done it again, snatching him up with its pseudopods and rocketing away into the distance. The Foundation goons were left standing there, utterly baffled. Moments later, the little boy opened his eyes in a nearby clearing, and with the warm, encouraging energy exuding from SCP-999 enveloping him, he felt something that neither he nor the world had felt for a long, long time. Truly safe. And if 999 could give that back to a frightened little boy who just lost everything, maybe he could give it back to the rest of the world too. It's chaos on the streets. People are running as fast as they can as monsters and horrors beyond imagination spill out of every alleyway. A monstrous reptilian beast had a screaming policeman in its jaws. A strange statue was standing on top of a pile of bodies, all with broken necks, and a horde of flesh-eating zombies chased some terrified civilians into broken storefronts. In short, all hell is breaking loose, and you're right there in the middle of it. As you try to avoid the legion of hungry undead, you see a beautiful woman beckoning you into an alley. You run to her, hoping that you'll have found some way out, but when you're in there and alone with her, desperately clutching the one pocket knife you managed to grasp in your trembling hand before your house was overrun by flesh-eating insects, she begins to laugh at you. The woman starts to change right before your eyes. Her flowing red dress transforms into impenetrable samurai armor. Her features become hard and severe, and a deathly sharp katana begins to manifest in her hand. As the anomalous swordsman walks towards you on this, the most terrifying day of your life, you realize that you probably won't live to see sundown. One of the most terrifying scenarios explored in the archives of the SCP Foundation is that of SCP-5000, events during which the Foundation's primary directive changes from the study and containment of anomalies to the extinction of all human life. What would you do in the shoes of a Foundation researcher during SCP-5000? What anomalies would you use to kill people or stop certain groups of interest from taking down the Foundation? We pose this question to you, the viewers of SCP Explained, on our Community tab, with one caveat. You can't use any nuclear weapons or any anomalies that can totally destroy the world quickly. So without further ado, let's see what kind of destruction you all wrought. Leo World said, "As a researcher, I would use the radio to make people hear the words of SCP-4511, the Swine God, to make them sacrifice others to his burning insides. It's good to let a less popular SCP have some spotlight in this scenario. Perhaps this idea could also be used for some groups of interest." This response reminds me of something my grandma used to say. If you have to wipe out the human race in order to destroy a horrifying entity lurking in the collective unconscious, you might as well get creative with it. She was a strange lady. Anyway, all hail the Swine God, may his eternal flame cleanse the earth, but this particular strategy would probably take a while to have an effect on the population at large, but points for originality. You see, Bite said, "I think a picture of SCP-096 would make an excellent weapon against groups of interest. Small, lightweight, discreet, guaranteed death of the target." Now this is a classic. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you've got a killing machine ready to be deployed as soon as someone looks at his face, why not take advantage of that? The only potential hang-up is the problem of getting the picture to the groups of interest without looking at them yourself. Once you've got a system down, then you can just spread 096's picture around and watch the body count rack up. This strategy is a lot like playing Call of Duty. It also destroys lives with a headshot. Derek McDaniel said, SCP-2501. Think about it. A telekinetic claw that can crush potentially anything while keeping a safe distance from any threats. It's a perfect weapon for stealth, hitting prior targets, and more. No muss, no fuss, just a telekinetic claw. Great thinking. Ghosts of the Cove said, "Okay, this is gonna take a while. Number 1, wake 239 up and tell her about the Chaos Insurgency. Show her videos of their raids on Foundation sites. Basically do everything to make them look like the bad guys. If all goes well, she'll wipe them out from existence like she did with the D-Class. Rinse and repeat for any GOIs that come off as hostile. Number 2, use SCP-038 to clone anomalies that can cause death. For example, clone SCP-4955, find field agents who specialize in melee combat, and send them out into densely populated areas. Number 3. Blast recordings of SCPs 336, 661, and 2284's voices on radio stations all over the world. Have 336's recordings be as long as possible. Get 661 to spread destructive thoughts over and over on recording, and make 2284 state that there's a safe zone at SCP-2316 so that people head over and recognize the bodies in the water. Number 4. Airdrop SCP-469 into Delhi, India, which is the world's noisiest city according to Google. Number 5. Using a front company, distribute pamphlets full of instructions on how to survive the event. On one of the pages of the pamphlets, print the descriptions of several deadly info-hazardous SCPs, 1128, 2316, etc. And finally, number 6. Integrate SCP-3280 into the water cycle. So this is the way the world goes out. Not with a bang, not with a whimper, but with a fleet of gas-lighting knives, potentially deadly radio broadcasts, a city crushed by a mass of wings, and killer anomalies disguised as life-saving resources, and then the global water supply being slowly replaced by sapient water that hates humans. Is there a word for being impressed and terrified at the same time? Because if there is, you'll find my picture next to it in the dictionary. Camille Letal Baloso said, "To ensure all children disappear, I would stop answering SCP-3034, the counting station. No matter how well hidden or protected some kids will be, they should disappear eventually. I'm just also really curious what would happen. I find that SCP spooky and fascinating." Well, that's absolutely terrifying. I can only imagine the chaos that would ensue once the adults noticed that all the children in the world had vanished. You probably wouldn't even need anomalous measures to take care of them. Their paranoia and rage would do the rest. This isn't the most efficient method, but it is the one that feels most like an unpublished Stephen King novel, so you've got that going for you. Cheat Code Master said, "I always keep a half-inch model of the original Generation 1 Devastator from Transformers in my pocket. I could put SCP-914 on the very fine setting, go into the input, hold my half-inch Devastator in the palm of my hand, and as the door closes shout, 'Prepare to meet your doom, nothing can withstand the might of Devastator.' And then I'll personally unleash my full destructive potential as the 120-meter-tall Combiner. It's officially documented in Transformers lore that though mass displacement technology combiners not only become bigger than the sum of their parts, but Godzilla-sized." Before we get into the plan itself, you always keep a half-inch model of the original Generation 1 Devastator from Transformers in your pocket? Just want to make sure I heard that right. No judgment, clearly you have a good reason. And that reason is that one day you'll be able to use the clockworks to transform yourself into a 120-meter-tall Devastator and obliterate all of humanity in the most ambitious crossover event of all time. Legendary Hydrogen said, "I would use the nerfing gun in order to use it on the groups of interest to devolve them into cavemen, but also against the people we're trying to kill as well. Then let them kill each other in territorial struggles, while they also wouldn't be aware of attacks by the other SCPs that have been released, making wiping out humanity faster and much more easier to get done before SCP-5000 could do their reset button." I had no idea we had so many supervillains in the SCP Explained audience. Using the nerfing gun to nerf all of humanity. Now that is truly on another level. Release 682 into the fray and things will get downright prehistoric. Nevermore Ghoul said, "As a researcher, I suggest you unleashing SCP-053, the little girl, into any large survival bunkers or communities that enemy organizations have created to save humanity. Easy to sneak her in and cause a mass amount of death due to her abilities. As to how to get her cooperation in killing all life, promise her more playtime with SCP-682. Okay, seriously people, these are getting downright diabolical. Since the young girl seems to be unaware of her effect on people, you probably wouldn't have to promise her anything. In fact, maybe it's best that she doesn't know she's being used as a pawn in a plan to wipe out all of humankind. Why pile on extra trauma during the apocalypse, right?" Silver Karoma said, "Well, I have been a fan of SCP for years now, so here's what I would do. Number 1. Get a hold of SCP-079 or the self-learning computer. Number 2. Put it on a little cart that was used to roll in a TV at school. Number 3. Go into 682's containment site. Number 4. Strike a deal with it. Since I know that 079 and 682 have a form of friendship, then it could work. Number 5, if the deal fails, then get SCP-999 to hug him until he becomes way less hostile and agrees to help us. The deal being that if he does help, then he will be allowed to leave the facility to a more open area in certain range, and he will get a few D-Class personnel as playthings. Number 6, get the assistance of SCP-343 to help us get rid of the menace and rebuild the world a bit better. Number 7, get the brilliance of the smartest SCPs out there, one of them being SCP-049, since this could be the pestilence he wanted to eradicate. Number 8, let the world know about the Foundation and help survivors and such, like this was in SCP-001 When Daybreak scenario. Number 9, neutralize or terminate SCP-5000. And number 10, rebuild the world. A bright spot of optimism in the darkness. Not quite what the prompt was going for, but it is admirable you try to save humanity somehow instead of just burning it all down. You might as well give it a shot, but be careful. If you're trying to save the world, the SCP Foundation itself is going to be gunning for you, and you'll be operating without the organization's resources behind you. Good luck. XCM said, here's an interesting one. 3008, the Infinite IKEA. Make signs pointing to it that make it look like a shelter and disguise it as one. People run in and they're trapped forever, or at least until they die due to the employees. So rather than destroying humanity directly, you can just confine them to an endless purgatory of Swedish meatballs and affordably priced furniture. Great way to get the job done while keeping your hands technically clean. Vlas Gaming said, I'd use SCP-5000 with a modification that would inject all the clones with SCP-008 to create an endless, never-ending horde of zombies to release into the world. If the site is never retaken and allowed to continue this process, I could, in theory, have a legit endless supply of SCP-008-1s to swarm the world with. Ah, the Walking Dead approach. You gotta give it up for the classics. A good old zombie apocalypse with an SCP Foundation twist. Always RA said, I suspect humanitarian aid packages will be deployed by do-gooders at some point. If so, slip in a set of SCP-178 into one of the larger refugee camps. Since third parties caught up in a 178 incident are also vulnerable to attack, job done. And since any sufficiently large group of people will have at least one goofball among them, this could help wreck major trade routes during the earlier days or weeks. I always had a feeling that the decline of the human race would start with a pair of 3D glasses. Everyone told me I was out of my mind and that I'd have to leave my showing of Avatar: The Way of Water without a refund. But look at me now. I was right all along. Kirby Kona said, as a researcher in this scenario, I'd find SCP-743, the deadly infinite chocolate fountain, and place it into SCP-914, the Clockworks, on either fine or very fine. If on very fine it's still able to be moved and carried, I'd take it to a refugee camp and wait until the now improved creatures tear those who are resisting the Foundation to shreds. Ooh, death by chocolate. Well, death by swarms of anomalous arthropods emerging from a chocolate fountain, but that just doesn't sound as good. Either way, that is a sweet victory. Johnry18 said, so if the goal is, as I understand it, to wipe out the entire human race without using reality warping SCPs of any kind, there are a number of options to choose from. First, I'd start with SCP-2419 and let loose the thousands of unliving D-Class who have had every trace of humanity wiped from their souls. They should be more than eager to rack up as high a body count as possible. Then I'd use SCPs capable of targeting specific areas or population centers like SCP-923, a satellite whose rays drive people into a murderous rage, or SCP-2617, a Russian radio tower that can summon an army of ice soldiers to exterminate anything within a pre-programmed set of coordinates. Also, while there is no shortage of bloodthirsty SCPs out there, including SCP-082, aka Ferdinand the Cannibal, or SCP-953, the polymorphic humanoid, I'd start with a bigger gun. SCP-353, aka Vector, is a 26-year-old girl with the ability to absorb, contain, manipulate, and release viruses as she pleases. She also happens to delight in killing as many people as she can, so I have a feeling she'd be more than happy to help, even against other agencies out to combat the Foundation. I may have been thinking about this for a while. You don't say. Thank you, Johnry, for one of the most in-depth and terrifying responses to our prompt. And on behalf of humanity, thank you for channeling this energy into SCP-related pursuits instead of bringing about the actual apocalypse. Between the laughing men, the rogue satellite, the Russian radio tower, and Vector, humanity and the dark passenger that dwells deep within every human's psyche doesn't stand a chance. All hell had broken loose. Sophie could barely believe she had survived for this long. Getting used to one dramatic change in her life was hard enough, but almost immediately after, the entire world had seemed to go crazy. As a result, she now had a whole new existence to try and adapt to, scavenging for what little scraps of food she could find in the ruined, desolate city. The monsters could appear at any time, day or night, either one on their own or whole droves of the nightmarish creatures that had been let loose on the world. This life was somehow far more dangerous on a day-to-day basis than her old one had been. And given Sophie used to work for the SCP-Foundation, that really was saying something. Formerly known as Dr. Cartwright, she had been a researcher at the Foundation for a number of years. While she had been far from reaching the upper echelons of the organization's most notorious staff, with the likes of Drs. Jack Bright and Kane Pathos Crow, nobody could deny Sophie was an expert when it came to studying the anomalous. As much as she understood the importance of their directive to safeguard humanity, the Foundation had, first and foremost, been a job to her, a means to an end, something to earn a living from and then move on. It wasn't worth giving up everything for, and when her life needed more focus than her work, Sophie wasn't hesitant to step away. Her mother had fallen ill, terminally, and as a result needed around-the-clock care. So Dr. Sophie Cartwright had no choice but to hand in her resignation from the SCP Foundation. There were times when she missed it, and moments after her mother eventually passed that Sophie considered going back. But she came to realize it wasn't the work itself she missed, not even her co-workers at the Foundation. It was the occasional rare anomaly that was just a completely harmless little oddity, not a monstrous abomination. Often in her new, unfamiliar life of resignation, Sophie would find herself looking wistfully at a picture of herself and one such anomaly. Technically, it was against the Foundation's rules to possess any photographic evidence of SCPs, but Sophie had made sure it didn't look like anything out of the ordinary. The picture had been taken on her phone and showed Sophie crouching down with the face of a curious but completely normal-looking black and gray tabby cat poking up in the foreground. Nothing about the picture gave any indication that the cat, named Josie, was actually missing her hindquarters and back legs. SCP-529, as the Foundation had designated her, was one of the few completely harmless SCPs in their care. Her only anomalous trait being that her entire back half was missing, either because it didn't exist or had somehow been displaced in another dimension, hence her nickname, Josie the Half-Cat. Given that she had been allowed to roam freely around the Foundation facility she was kept in, Josie had run across Dr. Cartwright a number of times, the pair of them eventually becoming friends. With a sigh and smile, Sophie had been looking at the photo on the day everything went wrong. Steel-capped boots came rushing up the stairs and down the corridors to her apartment, worn by a group of black-clad mercenaries. You see, unbeknownst to Sophie at the time she had tendered her resignation from the SCP Foundation, a number of the organization's higher-ups had also done the same. While Sophie's reasons for leaving were purely personal, the wave of resignations from other high-ranking Foundation personnel came as a reaction to something called Project Pneuma. This was an operation that had uncovered a disturbing truth about the psychosphere, a shared human unconsciousness that had led to the O5 Council proposing a new directive for the organization. Those that objected left the Foundation. Others were killed by their former employer and its merciless hit squads in cold blood. Perhaps thanks to some administrative error filing Sophie's resignation alongside those that had left after learning about Pneuma, or maybe because the Foundation didn't want her extensive knowledge of the anomalous being used against their newfound directive, they had sent a mobile task force to her apartment. Filing down the corridor, the soldiers lifted a battering ram and swung it forward, shattering the door, wooden splinters littering the floor as they breached the entrance. But Sophie had heard them coming, escaping as fast as she could, descending a fire escape ladder until she reached the street below. At that moment in time, Sophie had no idea why the Foundation had sent a hit squad out to kill her. Of course, the answer to that question quickly became obvious. Shortly after, reports came pouring in from all over the world, broadcast over every news channel before they were ultimately blocked. The SCP Foundation had gone public, revealing its existence to the entire world and declaring its new mission statement. Rather than protecting the world from anomalies, the Foundation had declared war, calling for the total and utter extinction of humanity. While Sophie had no way of knowing the reasons for the Foundation going rogue, it was clear that working for them in the past had put a target on her back. Luckily, she managed to avoid the MTF coming after her, getting swept up in a crowd that was fleeing from something far more horrific. SCP-682 had been released and was devouring people in broad daylight. The waking nightmare didn't stop there. Over the next few months, the Foundation released a number of dangerous anomalies on the world, using them to slaughter innocent people in droves, assassinate world leaders, and cripple organizations like the Global Occult Coalition to hinder humanity's chances of fighting back. And amongst it all, living through the chaos and carnage were tiny pockets of survivors. Although those two were starting to be rapidly picked off by the Foundation, deploying more of their mobile task force operatives or compliant SCPs to eliminate the refugees. Sophie had witnessed firsthand the Foundation's attacks, and as a result, had found it best to keep moving from camp to camp, only staying with one group of fellow survivors for a few nights each before moving on. She wasn't sure if the Foundation was specifically attacking the refugee camp she stopped at, or if it was a continuous, systematic extermination effort. She'd been noting down her ponderings in a half-burned notebook she had found while scavenging abandoned grocery stores for any remaining food that was still edible. A cynical part of her thought that it was perhaps pointless to document what was happening, but the former researcher and Sophie wanted to preserve any information she could about what the Foundation was subjecting people to. If anything, that knowledge might prove useful to someone in the future. Although, what future was a question Sophie Cartwright kept returning to, with no optimistic answer in sight. It was easy to miss how things had once been, to yearn for life, to get back to the way it once was, even though it was impossible now that the anomalies were rampaging the world over. It made sleeping hard, the fear of waking up to see the face of SCP-682 or SCP-096 staring back at her the moment she opened her eyes. One night, it was worse than ever. Every sound, no matter how faint or far away in Sophie's mind, could have been made by a carnivorous creature or an approaching Foundation foot soldier. A bottle clinked, waking Sophie from her restless sleep. Something was nearby, and from the sound of it, it was getting closer and closer. Sitting up in the alleyway she'd been sleeping in, Sophie looked around her, feeling her heart thumping against her ribs in fear. Then, through the dark, she caught the sight of a pair of beady, reflective eyes, followed by the sounds of a drawn-out, defensive yowl. For a second, she wondered if it could be. No, surely not. The eyes approached, a small, shadowy form behind them. Sophie could barely make it out in the night's darkness, even with the glow of distant fires in the sky on the horizon. But from what she could see, the creature approaching her was small, just about smaller than an average cat, about half the size. Her fingers trembling, she reached out a hand towards it as gently as she could, allowing it to sniff her for a moment. Then she felt it duck under her open palm, letting her stroke up its arched back. When her hand reached about halfway, Sophie could feel the slight yield of a barely tangible back half, which could only mean one thing. "Josie?" Sophie asked, holding a sob at the back of her throat. The little half-cat replied with a meow, recognizing the voice of her human friend from the Foundation. Immediately she leaped into the former researcher's lap, allowing Dr. Cartwright to hold her and stroke her. Giving in, so glad to be reunited with Josie, Sophie started to let out stifled sobbing sounds, careful not to attract attention, but allowing herself to be the happiest she'd felt in months since this had all started. Although she had no way of understanding Josie's meows, Dr. Cartwright assumed that the brave little half-cat had managed to escape the Foundation facility she used to call home with relative ease. And she was right. Since Josie was allowed to roam freely, she had been able to make a break for it when the Foundation's MTF kill squads opened fire on their own personnel at their various sites across the globe. The loud noise had caused Josie the half-cat to flee and hide until the sounds of gunfire and screams had all died down. By the time she emerged from her hiding place, a number of the anomalies once kept in containment had now been set loose on the world. With the facility busted wide open, SCP-529 had taken it upon herself to leave, and had been surviving in much the same way Sophie had, scavenging for scraps, passing from one refugee camp to the next, usually greeted with curiosity by any ordinary civilian who had never seen a cat with its entire back half missing. Now that they had been tearfully reunited, Josie and Sophie stuck together on their continuing travels through the now treacherous and SCP-infested world. Sophie's entries in her makeshift journal started to take on much more positive tones. While it was hard to be entirely optimistic living through an anomalous apocalypse, her spirits were at least lifted by having her little half-cat companion alongside her. Josie never seemed to stray too far from Sophie's side as they hiked their way across the country. Occasionally, SCP-529 would climb up her human friend's back and rest on her shoulders as they traversed more open terrain, her missing back half making it look like the little half-cat was perched precariously on her front two legs, next to Sophie's head. And, of course, whenever they stopped for the night, Josie would sleep curled up and purring contentedly, right next to Sophie. When the next morning came, she would awaken, stretch out her front paws with a yawn, then nuzzle at Sophie's sleeping face to wake her up. At first, Dr. Cartwright's plan had been to head due west from where she had started, hoping to reach Yellowstone National Park and access SCP-5000. There was a Foundation facility there, hidden deep underground and filled with all manner of anomalous technology. It was all intended to be used in case the world ended, and the human race was wiped out, even capable of mass-producing new human beings with customized memories, as well as holding a backup of all cumulative knowledge and data on Earth. Every book ever written, every terabyte of information on the internet, everything. However, passing through another camp, Sophie and Josie received word from one of the other survivors. Apparently, the Foundation had predicted that somebody with knowledge of SCP-5000 might try something like that, and how it would undermine their plans to wipe out humanity. During one of the moments where rebelling groups were able to temporarily restore TV and internet service, it was reported that the Foundation had already put a stop to that potential option from reverting their apocalypse. They had intentionally triggered an eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano, totally obliterating the facility housing SCP-5000 and one of humanity's last hopes at survival. Well, thanks for telling me, Sophie sighed. By now, she had long given up almost all hope that things would ever be the same again. But hearing the news about Yellowstone had extinguished the last little ember of optimism that she had left. There was no way back. Sensing her friend was upset, Josie meowed at her, either as if to tell Sophie, "It's okay," or, "I'm hungry." As the pair turned to leave, though, the other survivor called out at them. "Wait!" they said. "Look, I heard another rumor, and it might be a total myth, but there's meant to be a sanctuary not far from here." "What do you mean, sanctuary?" Sophie asked. "Like another camp? The Foundation will wipe it out within a week." "No, not a camp," the survivor replied. "It's just a rumor, but supposedly there's a refuge, some place where the SCP Foundation can't get to. Apparently there's a shelter, as well as plenty of food and water, probably enough for you and the little one." Sophie looked out of the corner of her eye at Josie, balanced on her shoulder. The pair of them had gone weeks without eating before arriving at this camp, and she had no idea how long it would be before they reached the next. The sight of her half-cat companion motivated her. They needed to survive. As long as they did, the Foundation couldn't win. Giving the other survivor a nod, they pointed her in the right direction. "That way, a few miles at least, but you gotta be careful getting through the forest," they explained. "Be careful. The Foundation's got people out on patrols over there, and they're real weird too. I seen them doing this strange ritual, letting their commander stab them, testing whether they can still feel pain or not." Within a few hours, the sun had set, with both Sophie and Josie deep in the heart of the woods. Just like every night since the Foundation had initiated their war on humanity, every sound, every snapped twig or rustling leaves in the breeze, filled Sophie with dread. But this time, at least she knew with certainty that there were MTF troops nearby. She could see their flashlights, beams of light bleeding through between the trees. Carefully holding Josie in her arms, she stepped carefully and quietly as she could through the forest. The half-cat was trembling, clearly feeling just as fearful as Sophie was. The former researcher was praying that her little friend wouldn't make a sound. She knew she wouldn't be able to help it if she did. Cats did instinctively make defensive yowls if they felt threatened, but even the slightest noise from Josie would give away their position to the MTF sweeping the area. "Fan out!" she heard the task force's field commander call. Even spread. If there's anyone here, you all know what to do. Sophie ducked down behind a fallen tree, covering her own mouth with her free hand, trying to stop her panicked breathing. Her only option were to make a break for it, dashing through the forest and hope she and Josie weren't caught, or worse, killed. Though these days there was really no difference between the two. Or she could wait for the MTF to pass by, continuing their search. She had spent months trying to survive in this anomalous apocalyptic nightmare. By now the Foundation couldn't have known she was there. Their forces were just combing the forest looking for any survivors they could find. But if she stayed still, there was still a chance one of the MTF would find her and Josie, and would either alert the others or just open fire on the spot. All things considered, neither option sounded ideal. Josie was getting restless, trying to wriggle free of Sophie's grip. The half-cat's incorporeal back half meant Sophie could only hold what little underside the feline friend had. Slowly she started to get up and made her way out from behind the tree, right into the path of an MTF trooper's flashlight. "Got a live one!" he yelled. A flash of light and a loud bang echoed through the forest. The bullet had torn through Sophie's chest, nearly missing her half-cat, but the noise of the shot had been more than enough to startle her. As Sophie dropped to the forest floor, gripping her heavily bleeding wound and writhing in pain, Josie leaped into the air towards the Foundation operative. Either in shock or because she somehow understood her protector had been shot, the brave little cat started clawing at the soldier's face. Despite her sharp front claws tearing at him, leaving red lines over his face, the armed man didn't react. It was as if he couldn't feel pain at all. The MTF trooper gripped Josie by the neck fur, pulling her away from him. Before he could reach for his sidearm, someone charged at him, knocking the Foundation operator over. Another shot rang out as he fell, tackled by Sophie. Meanwhile, Josie had dropped to the ground, landing on her two visible feet and hissing at the soldier. Scrambling to her feet, Sophie picked up Josie and ran, the sounds of the rest of the task force receding into the distance behind her. The little half-cat was looking back over her human friend's shoulder, watching as the sweeping flashlights of the MTF kill squad fanned between the trees until they eventually disappeared from view. Her earlier adrenaline spike began to drop sharply in time with the gradual rise of the sun. Sophie had long since slowed down, certain that she'd be able to give the Foundation's foot soldiers the slip. Josie had taken her favorite perch on Sophie's shoulder again, meaning she could use her hands to apply pressure to her two wounds. But with every step, the former researcher could feel her limbs getting heavier. Her pulse, which had drummed faster than ever as her and her half-cat had fled, was now slowing down with every fading beat. She was tired, so much that she could barely keep her head up, until eventually, Sophie had to stop. She sat at the edge of a lake in the middle of the forest, exhaustedly trying to catch her breath. Calmly, Josie hopped off her shoulder and sat down at her side, licking her paw and cleaning behind her ears. Sophie looked at her little friend and smiled, feeling a tear run down her face. She reached into her bag and produced her journal, tearing out a page and scrolling down a note with the last of her strength. "To whoever finds this half-cat, her name is Josie. She's my only friend left in the whole world. I've taken care of her for as long as I can, but I'll be dead soon. Please take care of her for me. Take her to safety. Be good to her, and she'll be good to you. And if you scavenge any cheese, only give her a little as a treat." After tying the note to Josie's midsection, so it rested atop her semi-corporeal back half, Sophie looked around one last time. The lake was calm, a tiny pocket of remaining peace in a world gone mad, overrun with anomalies. "Guess we did make it to a sanctuary after all, Josie," she whispered weakly. Giving her little half-cat one last scratch behind the ears, Josie meowed gratefully. Finally, unable to keep her eyes open and her head up any longer, Sophie Cartwright let herself drift off. Josie was left meowing at her friend to wake up. She sat with her all day. She didn't move, didn't even wake up when Josie nuzzled her face against hers like she had before. Sophie's face felt much colder now against the confused half-cat's fur. Eventually, Josie wandered off into the forest, towards an uncertain future. Maybe if this future wasn't set in stone, if it could be reset, then Josie the half-cat would see her friend Sophie again. "Blind fire!" Noah Grayson yelled. Behind him, his team dispersed on either side. Noah squeezed the trigger of his weapon, firing over his shoulder as he sprinted forward, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Stay sharp!" he called out. glancing sideways to ensure the others were keeping pace. They were trained for this, elite, focused, but the pressure was on.
Cover, now!
Noah shouted, diving behind a crumbling wall. His squad followed, scrambling for the nearest debris as fear kicked in. Without looking, they pointed their weapons and fired, the loud cracks of gunshots echoing all around them. Noah felt the rush of bullets zipping past, each one too close for comfort.
Grenade!
Someone yelled. Noah barely had time to brace himself before the explosion shook the ground.
All right, listen up.
Noah Grayson called, his voice cutting through the roar of the helicopter blades. As the leader of the elite mobile task force MTF Zeta-9 Mole-Rats, he stood tall in the cramped cabin, determination etched on his face. The glint in his eyes held their attention, even as the whir of the rotors threatened to drown him out.
Heading into a quarantine area, and reports indicate that SCP-610 is spreading. Word from above is that some of the other SCPs had been sent for testing, and our mission is to locate any missing personnel or anomalies and deal with them as needed. Understood? Nothing like a little anomaly hunting to spice up the day.
Jasper Carter replied with a grin. Let's hope they're just playing hide and seek, Olivia Hernandez chimed in, her voice steady, but her eyes betraying a hint of anxiety. Noah smirked slightly, appreciating the humor despite the gravity of their mission.
Just keep your guard up. We don't want any surprises, especially with what's been transferred to this area.
Any idea what they sent there? Liv asked. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in.
They haven't given me the full details of what might have gone wrong, but there's one in particular we need to be on the lookout for. Or I guess I should say, one that we don't want to see.
The steady thump of the helicopter's rotors beat out as they flew over the vast expanse of snow-covered Siberia. Emptiness stretched out before them, bleak and uninviting. But then the Foundation outpost slowly came into view, a dark silhouette against the endless white. Even from a distance, it looked abandoned, and that only heightened Noah's concern. The helicopter landed with a jolt, and the team quickly unstrapped themselves.
Everyone stay close,
Noah ordered, motioning for them to move out.
Keep your eyes open for anything unusual. Let's move out.
They stepped out into the frigid air, the biting cold slapping them in the face. Noah led the way, his breath visible in the air.
This place has been silent for too long. Let's check in.
The outpost loomed ahead, a series of metal buildings enveloped in an eerie silence. As they approached, Noah noticed the first signs of struggle. The door to the main building was ajar, and deep scratch marks marred the walls.
Stay alert,
he warned, nodding toward the entrance. They moved inside. The sound of their footsteps felt loud and out of place in the deserted hallways. Flickering lights cast ominous shadows on the walls, making it feel like the very building was alive and watching them. Noah glanced around, taking in the overturned furniture and scattered papers.
Looks like they left in a hurry,
Jasper murmured. No one laughed. Half-open doors lined the corridor, creaking softly as if inviting them to look inside. Noah could hear the faint sounds of their own breathing and the rustle of gear, but otherwise, it was too quiet, too still.
Keep your weapons ready,
Noah whispered. Every instinct told him something was off. The feeling gnawed at him, making his skin crawl. They passed broken windows where shards of glass glinted like sharp teeth, catching the light in strange ways. Outside, the snowy landscape provided a stark reminder of how isolated they were. The wind howled softly, like a ghostly warning. As they reached the control room door, Noah hesitated, glancing back at his team. It was in these moments that a faint hint of doubt always crept in. What if he had made a mistake and was leading his team right into a trap?
You good, boss?
Jasper inquired. Noah shook the doubt away and flashed Jasper a quick grin. He steadied himself and pushed the door to the control room open. With well-rehearsed motions, they stepped inside, weapons raised, scanning the room. It was empty, but the air was heavy, like it was holding its breath. The remnants of scattered papers and broken furniture hinted at a struggle, but there was no sign of life. Noah's gut twisted as his doubt came thundering back. Something was definitely wrong. Monitors were flickering with static, and the room was in disarray, but it was the bloody footprints leading away from the screens that made Noah's heart drop.
What the hell happened here?
One of the team members asked. his voice barely above a whisper. Noah crouched down, examining the prints. These look fresh. They're not alone. He straightened, a frown etched on his face. Start planting explosives. If the worst happens, we blow this whole place. As members of the team started planting remote explosives, the rest pressed further into the control room. But a sudden squelching sound made Noah freeze. He looked down, his boot partially sunken into a thick, slimy substance that clung to the floor like tar. One of his teammates cursed, lifting their foot to reveal a similar sticky mess that stretched in tendrils as they moved. The team exchanged uneasy glances as a pungent, rotting smell began to fill the air. Noah knelt cautiously, shining his flashlight across the floor. What he saw made his stomach churn. The slime was not just on the floor. It was interwoven with patches of raw, pulsing flesh that seemed to stretch out like veins along the ground, up the walls, and across the ceiling. He followed the grotesque growth with his eyes, and they came to rest on a sickening sight. The twisted, mangled remains of what had once been an MTF unit, their faces contorted in a mixture of terror and agony. But it was worse than that. The bodies were not just lying there. They were grotesquely fused with the sticky, fleshy growths of SCP-610. The infectious mass creeping through their hollow eye sockets merged with their exposed muscles and bones. "Oh, God," Jasper gasped, nearly retching. "Hold on," Olivia murmured, kneeling beside one of the figures. "We might have a survivor." She reached out, trying to clear away some of the infected flesh that clung to the armor. "Hey, can you hear me?" she whispered. The figure shifted slightly, and Olivia's heart leapt. She leaned in closer, squinting in the dim light. The face was swollen, the skin stretched tight and pale under layers of infection, but she could still make out the features: a nose, a mouth, a pair of sunken eyes hidden behind infected tissue. "Stay with me," she murmured. And then the figure's head jerked up, the infected skin peeling back just enough to reveal its face. Olivia's flashlight caught the hollow eyes and she inhaled sharply. The face was gaunt and distorted, almost skeletal, with patches of SCP-610 flesh merging into it, features that were painfully familiar. In that moment, Olivia realized the horror staring back at her. She had been briefed on what SCP-096 might look like, but this was even more nightmarish than what she could have ever imagined. Infected, mutated, and far more terrifying. And she had done the one thing you were never, ever supposed to do. She had looked directly at its face. "No," she breathed, stumbling back as her eyes locked onto its hollow gaze. "No, no, no." The creature let out a bone-chilling growl, a sound so twisted it seemed to vibrate the very air around them. Olivia felt a surge of pure terror, but her body was frozen, the gaze of SCP-096 holding her captive. Noah shouted,
Olivia, get back!
As he realized what had happened, he yanked her away from the creature, but SCP-096 was already stirring, its infected limbs convulsing as it strained against the SCP-610 growths holding it down. Olivia stumbled backward, her face pale as realization and fear flooded through her. It's SCP-096, she stammered, horror dawning in her voice. "It's been infected." The creature broke free from the fleshy restraints, its limbs now bloated with pulsating infected flesh. Its movements, though slower than normal, were erratic and aggressive. Without hesitation, Noah barked,
"Run! Everyone, out now!"
Behind them, the creature let out a deep, guttural roar, its fury and agony echoing down the halls as it tore through the outpost in pursuit.
"Keep moving! Don't look back!"
Noah yelled, leading the charge as they sprinted through the outpost. They ducked through doorways and around corners, the monster's guttural cries echoing behind them.
Look out!
One of the team members shouted, panic rising in his voice. SCP-096 crashed through a nearby wall, sending debris flying. Its eyes were wide and unseeing. Olivia was directly in its path, barely turning in time to see the creature hurtling toward her. SCP-096's infected, bloated arm swung out and caught her in a crushing grip. Olivia screamed as the creature lifted her into the air, her body writhing helplessly as it held her aloft. SCP-096's claws dug into her shoulders, its grip tightening with monstrous strength. With terrifying ease, it pulled, and Olivia's body tore apart under the immense force. Blood sprayed across the room as her screams were abruptly silenced, her form left twisted and broken in the creature's hands.
No!
Noah's voice cracked as he took a step forward, his heart pounding, before turning away to be sure he wouldn't see SCP-096's face if it turned towards him. Other MTF members weren't as quick, though, and caught sight of its face, and now the infected SCP-096 turned on them, tearing through their ranks. Noah could only watch helplessly as one of his teammates were thrown against the wall, his organs crushed on impact by SCP-096's maddened strength. They had no choice. They had to keep running. The remaining team stumbled into a small storage area, the air thick with dust and the smell of rusted metal. Crates were stacked haphazardly against the walls, and broken equipment littered the floor. As the team caught their breath, Noah's eyes darted to the entrance. Panic flashed across the faces of his remaining teammates as they scanned the room, realizing there was no way out. Noah clenched his jaw. "Barricade the door," he ordered, his tone firm but strained. Are we safe?" someone asked. But then the first scratch of claws against the door made them all jump. Someone must have seen its face, but no one was sure who. The sound of claws raking against the door grew louder. Noah could feel the ground beneath them shift as the creature slammed against the barricade. He glanced at his team, seeing the fear in their eyes, and took a deep breath to steady himself. "We need to lure it back to the control room," he said. "Once we get in there, we can use the explosives to collapse the building. It might be weak enough from the infection that we can trap it." "How?" a teammate asked, fear in their eyes. "It'll kill us!" "One of us has to draw its attention," Noah said, the grim reality settling in. Silence hung in the air, tension thick as they glanced around, weighing their options. Just then, Jasper stepped forward, his expression unexpectedly serious. "Noah's right," he insisted. "There's only one way to get out of this." Noah knew what his old friend was about to suggest. "Jazz, you don't have to do this." Jasper ignored him, though. "It's the only way we all don't go down here. It's not gonna end like this." Noah's throat tightened, but he forced himself to nod. He clasped Jasper's shoulder. "You sure about this?" Jasper nodded, determination in his eyes. "Yeah, just give me the detonator." Noah's heart sank, but he nodded, knowing he didn't have much of a choice. As he handed the remote detonator to his old friend, their eyes locked for a brief instant, an unspoken understanding passing between them. "You know what to do," Noah said, his voice low and steady, despite the anxiety churning inside of him. Jasper took a deep breath, steeling himself for the dangerous task ahead. "No sweat, boss. Just hold the line," he replied, his tone light, as he moved toward the barricade. Noah turned to his unit. "Get ready to open fire! We need to keep it distracted while he makes his move." He braced himself for a moment before yelling, "Ow!" The last piece of the barricade was removed and the door flung open. With a deafening roar, the mole rats unleashed a hail of bullets towards SCP-096. The air was riddled with the sharp crack of gunfire, drowning out the creature's cries. SCP-096 barely had time to lunge for them as bullets tore into its flesh, the creature writhing under the onslaught. "Hey, ugly!" Jasper shouted from behind the thrashing beast. The creature's head snapped toward him, its eyes wide with unseeing rage. "Move!" Noah yelled to the remaining team members as the MTF unit slipped out of the storage room. He glanced back, and a surge of dread washed over him when he saw Jasper leading SCP-096 down the hallway toward the control room. Noah pushed his unit out of the building, guiding them toward the safety of the outpost perimeter. Every corner they turned felt like a gamble, but Noah stayed focused, checking back occasionally to make sure everyone was still with him. Once outside, the frigid Siberian wind stung their cheeks and eyes as the mole rats raced across the snow, urgency driving them forward. Their hearts pounded in their chests, each step fueled by the weight of the moment. Then, just as they reached the edge of the outpost, the explosion erupted behind them, sending tremors through the ground and a thunderous boom that ricocheted through the air. Noah and the mole rats stood frozen for a moment, their breath still catching from the rush of escaping the nightmare behind them. Noah's mind raced, torn between grief for the fallen Joker and the relief of making it out alive. But something tugged at Noah's gut, almost as though things weren't over yet. That's when he saw it. In the distance among the rubble of the collapsed building, movement. At first it was just a shadow, but then they caught sight of it. SCP-096, its twisted, infected form clawing its way free from the wreckage, chunks of concrete and twisted metal peeling away from its body. Its flesh, infected by SCP-610, hung from its frame like grotesque patches, pulsing and twitching as it moved. Noah stared, dread filling his chest as he watched the creature slowly drag itself from the ruins. "Boss," one of the team members stammered, their voice shaking. I saw its face." Noah turned sharply to the teammate, his eyes wide, the implications sinking in like a cold dagger. The rest of the team stiffened, their confusion palpable. "What?" Noah asked, his voice quiet but tense. I didn't mean it," the team member whispered, their face pale. "Back in the storage room. It just happened. I saw its eyes." A heavy silence fell over them like a crushing weight. The realization was immediate and terrifying. The explosion, the sacrifice, Jasper's death, it was all for nothing. SCP-096 would not stop now. It was going to hunt them down, no matter where they ran. Noah clenched his fists, his mind racing. He felt a creeping dread settle in his chest, but he couldn't afford to lose focus. "It won't stop," he muttered, eyes hardening. "It'll find you, it'll find us, and it will kill us all until we find a way to stay ahead of it." As the mole rats scrambled toward the safety of the outpost perimeter, Noah grabbed his radio, sending an urgent transmission to Foundation HQ. "This is Zeta-9 reporting SCP-096 has been compromised. It's merged with SCP-610. Immediate quarantine of the entire region is required. Do you copy?" The radio crackled with static. Noah repeated his message, frustration gnawing at him. "Do you copy?" Nothing. "God, comms are down," Noah muttered through gritted teeth. He slammed the radio against his chest. He glanced at his team, their faces painted over with fear and exhaustion. Would they make it out of this mission alive? They needed a plan, but they had no clear way to communicate with HQ. "We have to head to higher ground," Noah snapped. "There's a mountain nearby, right at the edge of the SCP-610 corruption. It's our best shot at reconnecting with home." "But we'll be walking right around the edge of the infection," one team member said, anxiety in their voice. "What if it spreads faster than we can move?" Noah met their gaze, fear gnawing at the back of his mind, but he couldn't let it show. "We don't have a choice. It's either that, or SCP-096 catches up to us, and we know what happens then." The team shared uneasy glances but nodded. They knew the stakes. They had no control over the infection. They had no control over SCP-096's relentless pursuit, but they had one shot to stay ahead, and they had to take it. As they began their trek toward the mountain, the weight of their lost squad mates still fresh in their minds, Noah couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. The infection, the creature, the uncertainty of what awaited them. It all felt like chaos was tightening its grip. And as they moved forward, the distant roar of SCP-096 clawing through the rubble echoed faintly in the air, a reminder that the hunt had resumed. The silhouette of SCP-096 loomed against the snowy landscape as Noah Grayson and the mole rats sprinted towards the mountains. "Pick up the pace, mole rats!" shouted Noah, his voice desperately cutting through the howling wind. In the near total whiteout, visibility was almost zero. Their breaths crystallized in the air as they struggled forward, the blizzard building in intensity. But the worst was still to come. Every step crunched loudly underfoot, their legs sinking deep into the unyielding snow. What had started as a desperate escape had morphed into a final, nightmarish showdown against both the brutal winter and the relentless creature stalking them through the storm. Then, through the blinding veil of snow, Noah's eyes locked onto a shadow, a dark maw carved into the mountainside. It was the mouth of a cave. Noah's heart slammed in his chest, caught between relief and dread, as he signaled to the team. "There!" Noah pointed. His arm trembled as he gestured to the faint outline of the cave. His team's energy was nearly drained. Their steps faltered as they followed his gaze. Ahead, the darkness of the cave yawned open, a promise of refuge from the savage cold and the unseen terror of SCP-096 lurking somewhere in the blizzard. As they closed in, the cave's entrance seemed to swell, looming larger and more imposing with every step. "Stay sharp. We don't know what's in there," Noah shouted back to his team. One by one, the mole rats stepped into the unknown. The storm's icy grip lessened, giving way to an eerie silence. Inside, the darkness was thick and suffocating. The cold, damp air clung to their skin, chilling them to the bone. Under the narrow beams of their headlamps, the cave floor unfolded as a macabre scene, each detail sharper and more haunting. Scattered across the rocky ground lay remnants of a long-lost conflict. Shattered helmets, torn vests, rifles dust-covered and frozen in time. Each piece is a grim reminder of the teams who'd met their end here. Noah's flashlight beam trembled slightly as he scanned the debris. He picked up a helmet, its surface scratched and stained with old blood. "This is hammer-down gear," he announced solemnly. "Hammer-down in this sector?" a team member whispered, their light darting nervously around the cave's shadows. "Looks like this is where they made their last stand," Noah replied. He picked up a helmet with a giant gash, examining it briefly. They didn't go down without a fight. Noah replaced the helmet gently in its resting place, his expression somber. "And now it's our turn," Riley Grant said, her voice laced with dread. Riley was the target, the one SCP-096 was hunting. Noah nodded, his grip tightened on his weapon, as the wind snarled at the cave's mouth. "We need to push deeper into the cave," he instructed, glancing back at the ominous swirl of snow outside. "The temperature is going to drop well below freezing, and we're too exposed. We have to find better shelter. Let's move out." The air was thick with the metallic scent of rust and dried blood. Noah's flashlight sliced through the darkness. "Eyes sharp, keep it tight and watch your six," he commanded, his voice echoing off the cold walls. As they moved deeper, the walls seemed almost alive, coated in the thick, pulsating masses of SCP-610. The rocky surfaces throbbed grotesquely, the infection seeping deep into the stone. Bizarre, twisted patterns spread across the walls, twitching and recoiling as the flashlight beam skimmed over them. "Man, this stuff gives me the creeps," Chen Li muttered, his voice low, his flashlight beam lingering on a particularly large mass of SCP-610, which seemed to pulse and writhe in response. Noah glanced back at his team. "Stay focused," his voice steady, but laced with a faint tremor that hinted at the tension lurking beneath his calm exterior. The cave continued to narrow, the ceiling dropping lower, forcing them to duck as they moved. The tunnel's walls closed in tightly around them, the claustrophobic squeeze intensifying the dread that surrounded them. The silence of the cave shattered with a bone-chilling roar that erupted from the first chamber. It reverberated through the tunnels, a sound raw with primal rage and despair, shaking them to their cores. "It's SCP-096, Riley said, their voice barely above a whisper. "It found us." "You mean it found you?" Chen replied. "Keep moving, we can't stop now," Noah barked. The deeper they ventured, the more intense the infestation became. Then, as they entered the cavern ahead, the headlamps landed on a sight that terrified them. Embedded within the walls and floor were the twisted remnants of the Hammer-Down team. The once elite soldiers of the Foundation were now grotesquely fused with the SCP-610 infection. Their bodies were distorted, limbs contorted, faces barely distinguishable beneath layers of sticky, throbbing flesh. And then, as though sensing the mole rats' presence, the figures began to stir, moving in a sick, unnatural rhythm. One by one, the zombified soldiers peeled themselves from the walls with a sickening squelch. Their movements were jerky and unnatural, like grotesque puppets controlled by the vile, pulsing flesh that clung to their bodies. "Contact, 12 o'clock!" Riley's voice was sharp and urgent. She raised her rifle, her hand shaking slightly with adrenaline. The first shots rang out, reverberating around the cavern, a stark contrast to the quiet moans of the twisted figures now lurching towards them. Chaos erupted as Noah and his team retreated to a narrow part of the cave, the tight space forcing their grotesque assailants into a single-file line. Flames burst from their weapons, illuminating the cave with flickering, ghostly shadows. Each blast of fire met infected flesh with fierce sizzles and pops, filling the air with the stench of burning tissue. Chen let out a raw, guttural scream as he swept fiery jets from his flamethrower across the advancing foes. The blaze cast a hellish glow that painted the cave walls with flickering reds and oranges. But then, just as they seemed to be gaining control, a new terror announced itself. An unholy roar from the entrance of the cave. SCP-096 had found them. The creature loomed in the dim light, its elongated arms swinging as it charged into the cavern. The mole rats were trapped, monsters ahead and the relentless, nightmarish SCP-096 behind. But in that moment of sheer panic, Noah's mind raced and a desperate plan formed. "Let them fight each other!" he shouted, his voice barely piercing the cacophony of violence. Desperation and hope mingled in his tone, his plan fueled by the frenzy unfolding around them. Noah signaled to a team member who gave a quick nod before lobbing a flash grenade toward the hammer-down team and SCP-096. A blinding explosion of light erupted in the cave, illuminating every crevice with searing intensity. The zombified soldiers shifted their attention instantly to the shrieking SCP-096. The two monstrous forces crashed into each other, unleashing a gruesome symphony of roars and sounds of tearing flesh. This was the opening Noah had been waiting for. "This way!" he yelled, seizing the moment and leading the mole rats into a narrow side shaft he'd spotted earlier, now briefly unguarded in the melee. They slipped through just as the battle behind them escalated, the sound of SCP-096's enraged cries mingling with the unnatural groans of the hammer-down team, bounced through the cavern like distant rolls of thunder. Noah led his team down the narrow, winding path. Their hurried footsteps and labored breaths filled the narrower passageways as they sought refuge. Ahead, dimly illuminated by their headlamps, an old communications relay station emerged from the shadows. Nestled within an alcove, it stood as a relic of the Foundation's foresight, a long-forgotten emergency station, once pristine, now shrouded with dust and neglect. As the infected groans and SCP-096's enraged cries grew closer, Noah shoved the heavy metal door open, ushering his team inside. With another forceful push, the door slammed shut with a loud bang. They were safe, for now. Chen looked around the room. Foundation really planned for everything, huh? It was a comm unit. Noah rushed over, his fingers racing over the controls, sweeping away layers of dust and debris. "This is MTF Zeta-9 requesting immediate exfil from Site 610. He broadcasted into the static-filled void, desperation flickering in his eyes. The radio crackled before a cold, detached voice responded through the static. "MTF Zeta-9, proceed deeper into the site for containment protocol. Extraction denied." "Denied?" Noah's voice was a mixture of disbelief and anger as he slammed his fist against the metal console. The room fell into a stunned silence. The weight of their situation pressed down on them. Only the muffled roars and groans from the cavern behind them broke the thick stillness, a grim reminder of the horrors lurking just beyond. "Denied? Just like that?" Riley's voice cracked slightly. Chen leaned heavily against the cold metal door, his breath ragged, his face etched with fatigue and frustration. "What now? We just keep heading deeper into this nightmare?" Noah stood silently, his fist clenched against the console, his eyes scanning the dim room. He felt his team's eyes on him, searching for direction, for any glimmer of hope in his expression. But before he could find the words, a new sound sliced through the silence, a low, subtle creaking that seemed to come from the walls. The team froze, holding their breath, as a section of what looked like a solid bookcase along the wall began to shudder and rattle. Without warning, it swung open slowly, inch by inch, revealing a dark passage beyond. The door had been pushed open by someone or something hiding in the shadows. "What the?" Chen muttered, stepping forward, his flashlight aimed at darkness beyond the newly revealed doorway. "Could be a way out," Riley whispered, her hand subconsciously drifting to her weapon. Or a trap. The team exchanged wary looks. Noah took a deep breath. "Staying here isn't an option." "Could be a setup," Chen said, his voice low, his eyes never leaving that dark passage. Noah squared his shoulders as he met Chen's gaze. We moved forward. Noah's command lingered heavily in the air. After a tense pause, Chen's shoulders eased just slightly, his eyes dropping in a subtle, reluctant acknowledgement of Noah's authority. Noah turned back to the group, his voice firm and edged with authority. "Grab your weapons and check your gear," he ordered. "We need to be ready for anything." As the team hurriedly prepared, Noah's gaze fixed on the dark passage. Going forward meant venturing deeper into the unknown, possibly towards salvation, or deeper into peril. "All right, mole rats. Stay alert, stay alive," Noah said firmly, his voice steady, but carrying an undertone of nerves that only the sharpest ears could detect. With a collective yet hesitant nod, The team stepped into the darkness. They pressed forward, driven by the slender hope that Noah's instincts would lead them towards safety, rather than deeper into danger. Noah and the mole rats pressed deeper into the oppressive passage, their headlamps casting weak, flickering beams into the void. Each sharp breath formed ghostly puffs in the cold air before dissolving into the eerie silence. Then, the sound began. A faint, rhythmic pattern of footsteps echoing softly behind them. At first they dismissed it as their own movements bouncing off the stone walls. But as they stopped, the sounds stopped. When they moved again, it resumed. A chilling realization crept over them. They weren't alone. Someone or something was mimicking their movements, playing a sinister game with their nerves. Tension knotted in Noah's stomach as they continued, the air growing colder with each step. The corridor ahead subtly changed. The rough, jagged walls gave way to deliberate craftsmanship. Suddenly, Noah's foot caught the edge of something cloaked in the darkness. He stumbled forward, his heart lurching as he scrambled to catch himself. Breathing hard, he focused the light on the spot where he tripped. The outline of a staircase emerged from the shadows, carved meticulously into the stone floor.
Halt!
Noah commanded sharply, raising a hand. The team froze, tension crackling in the air. From below, a voice, too calm and polite against the backdrop of their dread, drifted up the staircase. "Please, do continue your descent," it urged, its tone oddly inviting amidst the inky blackness. Noah steadied his headlamp, angling the beam downward as he leaned closer. The narrow beam of light seemed to be swallowed up by the abyss. "Eyes sharp, keep it tight," he whispered. The team exchanged nervous glances, their faces pale in the dim light of their headlamps. As they descended, the tension within the group tightened. Chen hesitated, breaking the silence. "Are we sure this is a good idea?" Noah stopped and turned sharply. "We follow orders," he snapped, his command slicing through the doubt like a knife. Reluctantly, the mole rats continued, eventually to everyone's relief. There was a flicker of light just ahead. "That's it, just a bit further," coaxed the polite voice from the shadows. Riley muttered under her breath, "Something's off," but they continued to move forward. Reaching the bottom, they stepped into a vast laboratory. The space was clinical, with stainless steel surfaces gleaming under harsh lighting. Tables lined with bizarre equipment and instruments filled the room. It resembled a setup designed for macabre experiments. In one corner, they saw an unsettling sight, a fusion of SCP-610's flesh-like contagion with human bodies, some half transformed into grotesque hybrids, their expressions frozen in agony. Then, from the darkest corner of the room, a figure slowly emerged. SCP-049, the Plague Doctor. His presence, clad in the dark, ancient garb of a medieval physician, sent a chilling wave through the room. "Greetings. Your Foundation calls me SCP-049, he said calmly, his voice echoing slightly from behind the bird-like beak of his mask. "Please do not be alarmed. I'm here to cure." His hands remained clasped behind his back, his demeanor unsettling yet composed. The Plague Doctor glided past them, his long dark robe trailing behind as he approached a massive vault-like door. As he reached for the heavy handle, the mole rats gripped their weapons a little tighter, aware that SCP-049 intended to lock them in this room. "Don't take another step," Noah growled, aiming his gun squarely at the doctor. "Not to imprison you," SCP-049 began, his voice muffled slightly by his mask, "but to protect us from what hunts you." His dark, glassy eyes landed on Riley, scrutinizing her with a quiet intensity. "SCP-096, I presume," he added, revealing his unsettling awareness of their situation. Without another word, SCP-049 swung the heavy vault door shut. The metallic clang reverberated through the laboratory, making the mole rats jump. They exchanged nervous glances, the air thick with unease. "What are you doing here?" Noah demanded, his voice a mix of command and curiosity. SCP-049 paused, his head tilting as if pondering how much to disclose. "I am here by the Foundation's direction," he finally said, his tone measured. "They have tasked me with exploring potential cures for the afflictions of SCP-610. Before Noah could utter a word, a wild, frantic scratching tore through the silence, followed by the guttural sounds of something slamming against the vault door. SCP-096 had found them. The metal groaned under the relentless assault. "It wants her," Riley murmured, a tremor of fear in her voice as she backed away. SCP-049 stood firmly by the sealed vault door and addressed the group. "I can attempt to save her," he declared, his tone even, "but we must act quickly. This door will only hold briefly." His bird-like gaze settled on Riley, adding urgency to his words. Riley motioned towards the lab's horrific displays. "You want me to end up like those experiments?" "Science is fraught with risks," SCP-049 replied, maintaining his composure. "However, if we do nothing, SCP-096 will surely breach our defenses and endanger us all." The scratching at the door intensified. Noah's eyes met Riley's. "It's your call," he stated quietly. Riley nodded with a heavy sigh. She knew what she had to do. It was the only hope of saving her team. The plague doctor guided her to a large glass cylinder in the center of the room. With a resigned look at her comrades, she stepped inside. SCP-049 sealed the door and activated the mechanism. A clear, thick fluid began to fill the cylinder swiftly, rising towards Riley. Her panicked breaths fogged the glass, her wide eyes darting between the liquid and the others in the room. The cold fluid climbed past her shoulders, creeping up her neck as her chest heaved with mounting terror. The urgency in the room crackled. She was going to drown. Noah, driven by a surge of protectiveness for his squad, lunged forward and yanked the lever down with all his strength. The machinery groaned in protest, the sound slicing through the tense silence, but the liquid stopped just in time, lapping at Riley's chin. She gasped for air, her wide eyes locking onto Noah's as the room seemed to exhale in unison. SCP-049 stared intently at Noah. Suddenly breaking the standoff, he turned on his heel and walked towards the vault door. To everyone's horror, he began to unlock it as SCP-096 violently clawed at the other side. Chen, alarmed, aimed his weapon at SCP-049.
"What are you doing?"
In his chillingly calm manner, SCP-049 responded. "If you will not allow me to try and save her, we might as well let SCP-096 in and end this quickly." His gaze then shifted to Noah. Noah's eyes met Riley's through the glass, her wide, fear-stricken gaze locking onto his. For a moment, he hesitated, but Riley gave him a reluctant nod. Noah took a deep breath and pushed the lever back up, resuming the flow of liquid into the cylinder surrounding Riley. The clear, slimy substance rose rapidly, covering her completely. At first, she floated motionless, her body suspended in eerie calm within the slimy substance. But soon her lungs started to burn and cry out for air. Panic took over. She thrashed violently, her fists pounding against the glass. She mouthed silent, frantic pleas, swallowing more and more of the liquid. Noah and the mole rats looked away as Riley's muffled struggles grew louder. SCP-049 exuded an unsettling calm, stepped forward, and pressed a red button. A gooey substance began injecting into the cylinder. It was SCP-610. Riley's body started to morph grotesquely, becoming one with it. Noah gasped in horror, and Chen, outraged, raised his weapon towards SCP-049.
Why? Why did you do that to her, you psychopath?"
He shouted. SCP-049 formed what looked like a smile under his beak. "Did you notice the silence?" The mole rats turned toward the door. The scratching. It was over. SCP-096 had stopped its assault, as Riley was no longer a viable target. Noah lowered his weapon with a grim realization. He approached SCP-049, scrutinizing him closely. "It was you, wasn't it? You turned the Hammerdown team into zombies!" SCP-049 met Noah's fierce gaze. "Consider," he spoke slowly, "that what might appear as a setback could indeed be a pivotal advance. Much like the experiments with the Hammerdown team, we push boundaries to gain insight, not to inflict harm." As he spoke, Riley's form twisted inside the glass cylinder. Her body had merged with SCP-610. Noah's face darkened as he swiftly drew handcuffs from his belt and approached the plague doctor. But to his shock, SCP-049 voluntarily extended his arms, his long, dark sleeves falling back to reveal his wrists. "You are now obstructing the Foundation's orders," SCP-049 stated, his tone relaxed. "By stopping these experiments, you defy those above who seek progress through any means." Noah hesitated, a frown etched across his brow. Could the Foundation really endorse such drastic experiments? Was it possible they sanctioned the spread of SCP-610 in this manner? His mind raced as he considered the implications, the weight of his decisions heavier than ever. Noah snapped the cuffs onto SCP-049's wrists with a decisive click, looping the chain around a sturdy metal rail bolted to the lab wall. He gave the cuffs a firm tug, ensuring they held fast, then inspected the rail. It was solid, built to bear the weight of heavy lab equipment. Noah turned to face his team with a hardened expression. "Open the vault door," he commanded, ready to confront whatever lay beyond. "I would reconsider that action," SCP-049 interjected smoothly. "Opening that door could be premature. There is an alternative route for escape." He gazed toward the high ceiling, where a grid of air ducts was faintly visible. "Those ducts lead to safety. They offer a more discreet exit than confronting what waits outside this vault." The team looked at each other, the same thoughts racing through their minds. Could they trust the directions of a man who had just subjected one of their own to a horrific transformation? The question hung heavily as they weighed their limited options. "He's playing with us," Chen muttered under his breath, his hand instinctively resting on his weapon. Noah watched SCP-049 closely, searching for any sign of deceit. The plague doctor remained impassive, his masked face giving nothing away. After a tense moment, Noah made a decision. "We'll check the ducts, but if this is a trap..." He left the threat hanging, his stern look reinforcing the warning. Reluctantly, the team turned their attention to the air ducts, the metallic grates looming ominously above them. No one knew what was up there. There was only one way to find out. With a deep breath, Noah motioned for the team to move out. The air ducts groaned softly beneath the weight of the mole rats. Each faint creak was a reminder of how fragile their path truly was. The sound wasn't loud, but it felt deafening. Noah motioned to the team, silence from here on out. Every moment felt like a gamble, the cramped space squeezing the life out of his breaths. The mole rats nodded, watching as their leader moved forward, his palms slick with sweat as they slid along the cold metal. The ducts seemed to constrict with every movement, the walls brushing against his shoulders and knees, forcing him into an uncomfortable crawl. Behind him, the others followed in a single file, crawling every agonizing inch of the way. The dim light filtering through the slats of the ducts painted faint, distorted silhouettes on the walls, shadows that danced around them, mimicking their creeping advance. "Movement below," a faint voice crackled over the comms, barely above a whisper. One of the team members had spotted something through the slats. Noah froze, his breath catching in his throat. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to keep moving. They couldn't afford hesitation. Not now. "Eyes forward," Noah hissed. "Do not stop." The memory of SCP-096 loomed large in his mind, a nightmare waiting to be unleashed. Even the faintest glimpse of its face would seal their fate. He knew it was somewhere below them, prowling the labyrinthine corridors of the facility, its grotesque form lurking just out of sight. A sudden clang echoed through the ducts, distant but unmistakable. The team stopped, rooted to the spot. The sound stretched their already frayed nerves. Noah's pulse quickened, his heartbeat a deafening drum in his chest. His eyes darted wildly through the oppressive darkness, searching for the source of the noise. But the shadows refused to yield any answers. "Move!" Noah snapped, his tone leaving no room for argument. The team pushed forward, inch by painstaking inch. The ducts seemed to narrow even further, the metal walls scraping against Noah's shoulders with each movement. The effort was exhausting. His muscles screamed with every pull forward. The clang sounded again, but this time, it was closer. Everyone went still. They waited with bated breaths. Nothing. They looked to Noah to give them the signal to keep moving. He was frozen. "Captain?" one of the mole rats whispered. "Should we keep..." Noah cut them off, giving a sharp signal to move forward. His nerves were on edge. Claustrophobic spaces were not his forte. After what felt like an eternity, they finally reached a junction. Noah paused, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow with a shaky hand. His wrist-mounted map glowed faintly in the darkness, the light casting eerie shadows on his face. "Next sector is close," he murmured, his voice low but steady. "We'll drop down here. Stay sharp." Noah peered through the grate below. The corridor below was cloaked in deep shifting shadows that hinted at unseen secrets. It looked empty, but the silence made it feel alive. He took a deep breath and gestured to the others. One by one, they descended, their boots landing softly on the floor below. The air in the forgotten sector was thick with dust. The mole rats had to stifle their coughing fits. Each breath felt heavier than the last. The walls around them were lined with peeling paint, their surfaces streaked with dark, unidentifiable stains. Dangling wires swayed gently in the stagnant air. It felt like a place that time and everyone else had forgotten. "Captain?" one of the mole rats called softly. They motioned toward a section of the wall. "You need to see this." Noah approached, his boots crunching on the debris-strewn floor. His eyes narrowed as he examined the wall, its surface cracked and uneven. Something about it felt wrong. He extended a hand, his fingers brushing against the cold surface. A shiver ran up his spine as the walls seemed to hum faintly at his touch. A low vibration that was almost imperceptible, but undeniable. "There's something here," he muttered, more to himself than to the others. The mole rats hung back, their unease palpable as Noah continued his inspection. With a sharp tug, he dislodged a panel, the rusted metal groaning as it slid away to reveal a dark, recessed compartment. Inside, shrouded in dust and shadows, something glinted faintly in the dim light. "What the hell is that?" one of the mole rats whispered. Noah didn't answer. He was already stepping forward. Something was pulling him in, something he couldn't explain. His eyes locked onto the object in the compartment, a mechanical suit, its surface dull and pitted with age. It was SCP-5000, but it wasn't empty. A figure was slumped inside the suit, its form twisted and grotesque. The body's flesh had fused with the interior mechanisms, strands of muscle and tissue becoming one with the gears and joints. The head hung at an unnatural angle, the face partially obscured by the helmet. What little was visible was pale and bloated, a macabre reminder of whomever had worn the suit before. The mole rats recoiled, murmuring uneasily. Noah ventured towards it. "Noah!" one of them stated, but his name barely registered. He was drawn to the suit, the sensation growing stronger with every step. The air around it seemed to pulse, alive with strange energy. Noah reached out, his hands trembling slightly as they hovered over the cold metal. "It's waiting for me," he whispered, the words escaping without thought. As his fingers made contact, the hum grew louder, resonating through his body. The suit almost seemed to respond, its surface warming faintly beneath his touch. Without hesitation, Noah began to pull the body from the suit. The process was grisly, the remains definitely clinging on, as though the suit itself refused to let go of its hold. Bloodless tissue stretched and snapped, releasing wet, sickening sounds that bounced around the chamber. The mole rats watched in stunned silence as Noah pried the body free of the suit. Each movement was methodical, unrelenting, determined. Finally, the suit was empty. Noah tossed the remains to the side as if they were garbage. Before anyone on the team could voice their objections, Noah slipped himself into the suit. The fit was perfect, almost as though it was made for him. For a moment, there was silence. Then, everything changed. Holographic streams of data exploded before his eyes, cascading in vivid bursts of light. His senses were catapulted into overdrive. Every breath, every faint creak of the facility became deafeningly clear. He could hear the mole rats breathing, the hum of distant machinery, even the subtle shift of the infected terrain around them. His vision sharpened, the dim of the room suddenly bright and vivid. "Noah, what's happening?" one of the mole rats finally managed to ask, their voice laced with panic. Noah couldn't respond. The suit was binding tighter with each passing second, its systems fusing with him. Threat markers appeared in his vision, mapping potential dangers with chilling precision. It was overwhelming and exhilarating all at once. I can see everything," Noah murmured, his voice hollow and mechanical, as if spoken from somewhere far away. The faint glow of the suit cast distorted shadows on the pulsating wall. "We need to keep moving," he added, the command cold and clipped. The group pressed on, the mole rats following their leader with a mix of duty and reluctance. The walls around them felt alive, throbbing in time with the grotesque infection of SCP-610. They seemed to breathe, their pulsating surfaces glistening with a sickly sheen. Fleshy tendrils spread like veins, crawling over every surface, writhing faintly as if responding to the group's presence. Noah led the way, his enhanced vision cutting through the darkness like a blade. The suit's interface was relentless, feeding him a constant stream of information. Structural weaknesses mapped themselves onto his vision. Distant heat signatures blinked faintly in the corner of his eye, and subtle shifts in the infected terrain appeared as warnings. Structural collapse possible ahead. The suit chimed softly. Noah made a sharp gesture, signaling the team to adjust their path. "Boss, isn't this where the Hammerdown team was?" one of the mole rats dared to ask. Noah ignored the question. He kept moving. He had to keep moving. The team followed him without further questions, casting anxious glances at each other. Then, it happened. A sound that sent a chill rippling through the group. A sickening squelch reverberated through the tunnel, wet and visceral. Something was tearing free from the walls. It was faint at first, but then came again, louder, closer. "They're here," Noah said, his voice devoid of emotion, more an observation than a warning. Ahead, the shadows moved. At first, they were slow and disjointed, but as they stepped into the faint light of the team's weapons, the true horror started to emerge. The zombified remains of the Hammerdown team lurched into full view. Their bodies were grotesque amalgamations of armor and infection. What had once been tactical gear was now fused with the pulsating organic growth of SCP-610. Limbs jerked unnaturally, like broken puppets controlled by unseen hands. Faces were stretched and bloated, their features twisted into horrific parodies of humanity. From their mouths came guttural, unnatural sounds, a mix of groans and gurgles that filled the narrow space.
Contact!
One of the mole rats yelled, raising their weapons, their voice cracking under the weight of fear. "No!" Noah's voice cut through the tension. "Hold your fire. I'll handle this." Before anyone could protest, Noah activated the suit's stealth system. His form shimmered, then vanished, melting seamlessly into the shadows. The faint hum of the suit faded as he disappeared, leaving the team standing in silence.
What's he doing?
One of the mole rats whispered, their grip tightening on their weapon. The others looked at each other, panic and fear etched on their faces. But they held their position, their nerves fraying as the infected soldiers shambled closer. Noah moved like a ghost, his steps silent and deliberate. Through the suit's interface, the world was laid bare. The infected figures were overlaid with tactical data. Weak points in their armor glowed faintly. Movement patterns traced themselves in fluid arcs, and vitals flickered as faint pulses of light. His first strike was swift and came without warning. From the shadows, Noah emerged a blur of motion as he closed the gap to his first target. The infected soldier jerked violently as Noah's blade, a sharp extension of the suit's arm, pierced the base of its skull. The grotesque form crumpled silently to the ground. He vanished again before the others could react, moving with a speed and precision that seemed inhuman. Another infected soldier staggered, its helmeted head twisting unnaturally as Noah struck with brutal efficiency. One by one, he incapacitated them, each takedown executed with cold, surgical precision. The mole rats could do nothing but watch, their weapons trembling in their hands as their captain became something else entirely, a predator stalking the remains of their former allies. The last infected soldier turned, its movements almost hesitant, as if it sensed the inevitability of its fate. Noah struck from behind, his blade slicing cleanly through the twisted mass of flesh and armor. For a moment, the cave fell silent, save for the faint squelch of infected bodies collapsing to the floor. Noah reappeared, his suit's faint glow casting eerie light over the carnage. "Clear," he said, his voice as cold as the suit's metallic sheen. The mole rats stared at Noah, unsure of what they had just witnessed. Noah stood in the faint glow of the suit, his form impossibly calm amid the carnage that surrounded them. This was no longer the leader they had followed through countless missions. There was something different, something alien. The team huddled against the walls, their weapons lowered but still gripped tightly, fingers hovering over the triggers, wary of another attack. Is it over?" One of the mole rats finally whispered with a trembling voice. Noah didn't answer. He stood apart, still and unnervingly calm, completely untouched by the ordeal. And then, another faint squelch, subtle, blending in with the ambient sound. Noah's head snapped toward the source, his enhanced vision catching movement in the corner of the room. The twisted bodies of the zombified hammer-down team, which had fallen mere moments ago, began to stir. Limbs twitched, fingers clawed at the infected ground, and hollow groans escaped from the warped remains of their throats. "They're waking up," Noah said flatly, his voice carrying no panic, only cold observation. "What?" one of the mole rats blurted, their voice cracking as their gaze darted to the reanimated forms. "How?" "They're not alive," Noah replied. "You can't kill what's already dead." The groans grew louder, swelling into a haunting symphony. The zombified bodies convulsed as they began to rise. Armor creaked, fused flesh tore, and the hollow, glassy eyes of the infected soldiers locked onto the team. "We're leaving," Noah ordered, his voice sharper now. "Through there?" A mole rat gestured toward the narrow tunnel leading out of the chamber. "Now," Noah replied, already moving. Reluctantly, the team followed, casting nervous glances behind them as the zombified soldiers rose to their feet. The sounds of the infected hammer-down team echoed through the caves, growing louder, hungrier, as the mole rats slipped deeper into the tunnels. The air grew colder with every step, the damp humidity of the caves giving way to a biting chill that clawed at their skin. Their breaths turned to mist, visible in the dim light as the tunnel narrowed around them. Suddenly, a low, guttural wail echoed faintly through the passage. It started as a whimper, almost mournful, but quickly grew into something raw and more bone-chilling. The mole rats froze, their blood turning to ice at the noise. Noah turned sharply, raising his hand in a quick signal. "Be still," he commanded. "Close your eyes. Now." The mole rats exchanged panicked looks but obeyed, their eyes squeezing shut as their hands gripped their weapons tightly. The wailing grew louder, its pitch rising as it moved through the tunnels. The air seemed to thrum with tension as SCP-096's cries grew closer. A faint shuffle echoed behind them, followed by the distinct shape of something dragging across the stone floor. The sound drew nearer, deliberate and searching. Noah stood perfectly still, his eyes closed, his breathing controlled. The faint hum of the suit was the only indication of his presence. SCP-096 entered the space, its movements erratic yet purposeful. The creature's gaunt, elongated frame twisted and jerked as it swiveled its head, its hollow eyes scanning the group. Its breaths were labored, rasping, each exhale a harsh, guttural sound that sent shivers through the mole rats. It moved among them, its presence heavy and oppressive. The creature leaned down, its face mere inches from one of the soldiers, its breaths brushing against their cheek. The soldier didn't move, their knuckles white as they gripped their weapons. For a moment, the only sound was the creature's breaths and the pounding heartbeats of the team. Then, it happened. One of the mole rats, overcome by a mix of terror and curiosity, opened an eye just for a second. But it was a second too long. SCP-096 snapped its head toward them. Its wailing stopped abruptly, replaced by a guttural snarl that shook the air. Before anyone could react, the creature lunged. The mole rat let out a strangled cry as SCP-096 descended upon them, its bony hands tearing through flesh and bone. Blood sprayed in violent arcs, painting the tunnel walls in crimson streaks. while the wet, grotesque sounds of tearing flesh and cracking bones sliced through the darkness.
Keep your eyes shut,
Noah barked. The remaining mole rats obeyed, trembling as they gripped their weapons even tighter. The carnage ended as quickly as it began. SCP-096 let out a final guttural snarl before the sound of its shuffling footsteps receded into the distance. Minutes passed like hours, the silence in the tunnel stretching thin and taut. Noah opened his eyes first, his enhanced vision sweeping the space. The remains of the fallen soldier were unrecognizable, torn apart in a frenzy of violence, but SCP-096 was gone. "Open your eyes," Noah commanded. One by one, the mole rats complied, their expressions pale and haunted as they took in the aftermath. Noah didn't wait for their questions or their fear to take hold. "Move," he ordered, his voice leaving no room for hesitation. The team followed, their steps heavy and reluctant as they trudged forward. Ahead, the faint light of the cave mouth glowed like a beacon of hope. When they emerged, the cold slammed into them. The wind roared across the Siberian tundra, carrying with it a swirl of snow and ice that stung their exposed skin. The sky above was a dull gray, stretching endlessly over a barren, frozen wasteland. The landscape felt as lifeless as the infected they had just left behind. "It's freezing," one of the mole rats muttered, their voice barely audible over the howling wind. They pulled their jacket tighter, their gloved hands shaking as they adjusted their gear. Another turned in a slow circle, their expression tightening with frustration as they took in the vast emptiness around them.
Where are we even supposed to go now?
They asked, their tones strained, anger barely masking their fear. Noah stood apart from the group, his back to them as he scanned the horizon with the suit's enhanced sensors. The faint glow of the suit created an otherworldly aura around him, its light pulsating against the backdrop of the desolate tundra. "We're heading back to the outpost," Noah said, his voice steady despite the chaos of their surroundings.
"To what?"
Another mole rat snapped.
"We'll be exposed out here, to the cold, to SCP-096, to everything."
Noah turned slowly. The glow from the suit obscured his face, but the intensity of his gaze was palpable. "SCP-096 will not follow us," he said, his tone carrying an edge of finality. The mole rat squared off with Noah, inches away from his face.
"And how can you possibly know that?"
Noah just stared at him, no hint of emotion on his face. He gestured back toward the cave. From within, faint echoes of movement and guttural groans reached them. "Because the last one of us who saw its face is gone," he said flatly. "SCP-096 doesn't hunt the dead." The weight of his words settled over the group. A heavy silence followed, broken only by the relentless howling of the wind. "This is insane," one of the mole rats muttered. Fear and exhaustion was fueling dissent among the team. They glanced at the endless tundra ahead, then back toward the cave.
"We can't survive out here. We're sitting ducks."
Noah's visor tilted slightly, his attention shifting briefly to the suit's interface as it chimed softly in his ear. Heat signatures blinked faintly on the horizon, distant, but not far enough. "Then stay," he said coldly, his tone devoid of empathy. Without waiting for a response, he turned and began walking. The mole rats paused, the tension rippling between them. The man who had led them through countless missions, who had once inspired unwavering loyalty, now seemed like a stranger, more machine than human. To stay meant facing the infected, now fully awakened in the caves behind them, or SCP-096, whose pursuit would surely never end. One by one, they followed Noah, their movements slow and reluctant. The icy wind bit at their faces. It offered no shelter, no solace, and no promises of survival. Ahead, Noah trudged forward, his figure barely visible against the endless white expanse of the frozen landscape. The wind whipped around the mole rats, carrying with it biting shards of ice that scraped against exposed skin and settled into the folds of clothing. Each step felt heavier than the last. The snow beneath their boots crunched faintly against the deafening roar of the elements. The horizon offered no landmarks, no hope of refuge, and yet the mole rats still followed Noah, their movements sluggish and labored, their breath visible in short, sharp bursts. Time lost meaning in the cold. Minutes felt like hours, each passing moment a test of their endurance. Days had passed since they'd last eaten anything substantial. and their reserves of energy were all but gone. One of the team members, a grizzled veteran with a deep scar running across his jaw, slowed his pace and reached into a pocket. With trembling hands, he pulled out a small ration pack, hardly enough to sustain a single person, let alone the entire group. Yet without hesitation, he began breaking it apart, dividing the brittle, frozen fragments of food into smaller pieces.
"Take this,"
he said, his voice rough but kind, as he handed a small portion to each of his teammates. The others nodded their thanks, their faces etched with gratitude and exhaustion. When he reached Noah, he paused for a moment before extending the last sliver of the ration.
"Captain,"
he offered quietly. Noah didn't stop. His pace didn't falter, nor did he turn to acknowledge the gesture. The faint glow of the suit was the only sign of his presence, an eerie beacon against the desolation. "I don't need it," Noah said, his tone flat, devoid of any inflection. The man lowered his hand, his expression darkening with unease. He quickened his pace to fall in step with Noah, his breath catching in the frozen air.
"What exactly is that thing doing to you?"
he asked, his eyes narrowing as he studied the suit. Noah didn't answer immediately. His focus was elsewhere, his mind consumed by the relentless stream of data pouring into the suit's interface. "I'm fine," Noah said at last. But he wasn't. The mole rats exchanged uneasy looks, their captain's words doing little to reassure them. The suit had become an extension of him, and with every step, it pulled him further from the people he had sworn to protect. His thoughts were no longer his own. Decisions that had once been tempered by instinct and humanity were now filtered through the cold logic of the suit's programming. "Hold here," Noah commanded suddenly, raising a hand. The team stopped, huddling together for warmth as the freezing wind tore through their gear. Noah stood apart, his head tilted slightly as the interface fed him new information, the chime of its updates punctuating the roaring wind. As they waited, Noah delved deeper into the suit's memory banks. The encrypted logs unfolded before him, their contents a dark mirror reflecting truths the Foundation had buried. Images flickered in his vision, entire cities consumed by fire, civilians torn apart by SCPs unleashed under the guise of containment, nations plunged into chaos. Each scenario was meticulously calculated, every disaster serving a hidden agenda. Names surfaced in the data, shadowy figures orchestrating global crises from behind the scenes. Their motives were painted in greed and power, their decisions justified by cold, ruthless logic. The suit offered no judgment, only facts, but the weight of the revelations pressed down on Noah like an avalanche. His breath caught in his throat. The frozen air burned as he exhaled, his fists clenched tightly at his sides. "Captain?" one of the mole rats asked, their voice tentative, taut with concern. The truth Noah had uncovered was too vast, too damning to put into words. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely audible over the wind.
"We've been lied to."
The words hit the team harder than the cold ever could. They exchanged wary glances, the unease between them deepening. "What are you talking about?" someone pressed, their tone equal parts fear and frustration. Noah didn't elaborate. His gaze was fixed on the horizon, the suit's glow reflecting the storm brewing within him. "We're not pawns," he muttered, his voice trembling with a quiet fury that burned against the icy winds. Without another word, he began to walk. The mole rats said nothing, their silence heavy with unspoken questions. They trudged on, their captain leading them deeper into the frozen expanse. The outpost loomed ahead, a dark, jagged shell barely standing against the Siberian tundra. Its walls were torn and scorched, and thick layers of snow and ice clung to it, hiding the full extent of its decay. Noah pressed forward, the faint glow of his suit setting him apart from the others. Behind him, the mole rats followed reluctantly, their movements hesitant, their unease palpable.
"Another death trap,"
one of them muttered, barely audible over the howling wind. Noah didn't turn, didn't flinch. If he even heard the remark, he gave no indication. Inside, the cold followed them through the shattered doorway, biting at their exposed faces and sinking into their gear. The air was thick with the stench of rust and something sour, more visceral. The faint echo of their boots against the floor was the only sound as they advanced, their weapons drawn and ready. Why are we even here? One of the mole rats finally asked, their voice edged with frustration. Because I said so, came the clipped reply. That was all they ever got from Noah now. Orders, no explanations. The tension between him and the team grew with each word he did not say. The corridor stretched ahead, dark and narrow, its walls marked with deep gashes and scorched metal. Pools of some viscous substance sizzled faintly on the floor. Captain, one of them whispered, stopping to examine the marks. Something massive did this. Noah didn't respond. His focus was locked on the readings flashing across his visor, faint heat signatures flickering at the edges of his vision. We're not alone, he murmured, his voice even, as though the revelation was inconsequential. The team exchanged uneasy glances, their grips tightening on their weapons. A low growl rolled through the corridor, deep and resonant. It wasn't loud, but it made everyone freeze in place. Noah raised a hand, signaling them to stay still, to stay quiet. Another sound followed, a faint scraping, metal against metal. It came from somewhere ahead, close enough to send a chill over the team. We shouldn't be here, a mole rat said, their voice trembling. This isn't up for debate, Noah replied, his tone as cold as the air around him. The team wrestled with their reluctance. An order was an order, no matter how bitter it tasted. Their movements grew sluggish, their breaths shallow and uneven. They rounded a corner, and that's when they saw it. At the far end of the corridor, something lurked in the shadows. It was enormous, its form barely visible in the flickering light of a damaged overhead light. Scales glinted faintly, and a pair of eyes glowed in the darkness, unblinking and predatory. The creature stepped forward, its claws clicking against the floor, every step radiating power. SCP-5000. Noah stopped, the suit humming softly as it activated combat systems. He held his ground, his posture steady as he studied the creature. One of the mole rats shifted uneasily, their finger moving to the trigger of their weapon. What's the plan? They asked, their voice a strained whisper. Noah didn't respond immediately, his visor glowing faintly as it fed him data on the creature's movements. Hold fire, he said finally, his voice firm. The mole rats felt their distrust bubbling to the surface. One of them glared at Noah, their frustration evident. Hold fire? They repeated, their voice thick with incredulity and simmering anger. Noah's gaze didn't shift from SCP-682 as it let out a low snarl. The mole rats' unease deepened, but they followed Noah's order, weapons ready. The creature took another step forward, its claws digging into the floor, its massive head tilting as if assessing its prey. Noah adjusted his stance, the glow of his suit casting long shadows down the corridor. Stay sharp, he said. The team braced themselves, the air around them heavy with anticipation. The creature took another step forward, its claws clicking against the floor with a deliberate rhythm. The sound echoed through the corridor, sharp and unnerving, as if it were testing their resolve. Noah didn't move, his stance unyielding as the mole rat shifted uncomfortably behind him, the faint hum of his suit cutting through the tension. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, SCP-682 turned and retreated into the shadows. Its massive form melted into the darkness with a fluidity that didn't match its size, leaving the corridor eerily still. The mole rats held their breaths, their eyes darting between the shadows at the end of the corridor and Noah's glowing figure. Did it leave? One of them asked. Noah's visor flickered with streams of data mapping the creature's retreating heat signature. No, he said calmly. It's circling, testing us. The team exchanged quick glances. Their distrust was unspoken, each of them questioning whether Noah even cared if they survived. Captain, we can't, one of the mole rats began, but a low growl cut them off. The sound rolled through the corridor, deeper and more menacing this time. It came from somewhere ahead, though the echoes made it impossible to pinpoint. Noah raised a hand for silence, his visor glowing faintly as he scanned the surroundings. Keep moving, he ordered. One by one they stepped forward, their movements slow and deliberate. With each step, the air grew thicker, as if the corridor resented their presence. The oppressive silence was shattered only by the faint, menacing hiss of acid pooling on the floor. Claw marks marred every surface, deep Jagged gouges slashed into the walls and ceiling. Twisted remnants of containment units littered the ground. The reinforced glass melted and warped. "This place looks like a war zone," one of the mole rats muttered, looking around at the scene of devastation. Noah didn't respond. His focus was fixed on the faint readings flickering in his visor. Heat signatures pulsed faintly at the edges of his vision, erratic and disjointed. As they rounded a corner, the smell hit them, a sharp, acrid tang that burned the back of their throats. The floor beneath them was streaked with a liquid that bubbled faintly, eating away at the metal surface. "Acid," one of the mole rats whispered, their voice tight. "And fresh." Noah crouched briefly, the suit's sensors analyzing the substance. The data confirmed what he already knew. SCP-682 had been here. "We're close," he said quietly, rising to his feet. The corridor opened into a wide, cavernous chamber. The air was colder, the temperature dropping sharply as they stepped inside. The walls were lined with more claw marks, the jagged gashes forming a chaotic pattern that seemed to radiate outward from the center of the room. In the middle of the chamber lay the shattered remains of a containment unit. The reinforced glass had been melted into jagged shards, and the metal framework was twisted and scorched. Noah stepped forward, his visor glowing faintly as it scanned the wreckage. The suit's interface fed him streams of information, chemical analysis of the acid, structural weaknesses in the room, and faint traces of movement. One of the mole rats approached, their voice low. "This isn't damage. It's carnage. Whatever was in there, it tore this place apart." Noah didn't answer. His focus shifted to the edges of the room, where the shadows seemed to move unnaturally. A low, guttural growl reverberated through the chamber, closer now, its vibrations crawling beneath their skin. It wasn't just a sound, it was a presence, oppressive and unrelenting, pressing down on them like an invisible weight. It was suffocating and inescapable. The mole rats instinctively raised their weapons, scanning the room. "Eyes sharp," Noah commanded. The growl came again, followed by the slow, deliberate scrape of claws against metal. The sound bounced through the chamber, amplified by the sheer size of the space. In the far corner, the shadow shifted. A pair of glowing eyes blinked into existence, locking onto the group with a predatory intelligence, sending a chill through the room. SCP-682 stepped forward, its massive form illuminated by the faint light filtering into the chamber. Its scales glinted like armor, and its movements were calculated, deliberate. The mole rats tensed, their breaths shallow as they waited for Noah's command. "Stay close," he said, his voice even, "and don't make it worse." SCP-682 moved into the light, revealing its massive form. The creature paused, its glowing eyes narrowing as it studied the group, its head tilting slightly as though calculating the most efficient way to strike. The mole rats tightened their formation instinctively. "It's watching us," one of the mole rats whispered, their voice shaking. Noah raised a hand without turning. "Hold your fire," he said, his tone cold and precise. "It's testing us, Captain," another said, their voice tight with suppressed fear. "If we don't take the first shot—" "It won't make a difference," Noah interrupted, his gaze locked on SCP-682. "Bullets won't stop it. Save your ammo." SCP-682 let out a low, guttural snarl. It took another step forward, its claws digging into the floor with a screeching scrape. The creature's gaze shifted momentarily, scanning the group as if assessing their individual threat levels. Noah could feel the weight of its attention, the cold intelligence behind its movements, unnerving even through the suit's filtered data streams. "Move back," Noah ordered, his voice sharp. The mole rats began to retreat, their steps slow and cautious. Then, it struck. SCP-682 lunged forward with terrifying speed, its massive claws tearing through the space where the team had just been standing. The impact sent a shockwave through the chamber, debris scattering in every direction as the floor buckled under the force. "Scatter!" Noah barked, the urgency in his tone cutting through the chaos. The mole rats split into two smaller groups, their movements frantic as SCP-682 turned to pursue them. The creature's tail whipped through the air, smashing into a wall and sending chunks of concrete and steel raining down. Noah sprung into action. The the suit's systems coming alive as its combat protocols activated. His visor flooded with tactical data, SCP-682's movement patterns, weak points in its armor, and potential routes for escape.
Cover fire!
One of the mole rats shouted, their weapons bursting into life as they aimed at the creature's legs. The rounds ricocheted off SCP-682's armored hide with a metallic ping, utterly ineffective against its impenetrable scales. Unbothered, the creature turned sharply, its predatory eyes locking onto the source of the gunfire. Noah surged forward, the suit propelling him with inhuman speed. He struck at SCP-682's side, aiming for a cluster of damaged scales near its shoulder. The blow connected with a sharp crack, but the creature barely flinched, its attention shifting to Noah. It lashed out with a massive claw, the force of the attack sending Noah skidding across the chamber. He recovered quickly, the suit absorbing much of the impact, but the sheer power of SCP-682's strike left him rattled.
Fall back!
Noah shouted, his voice cutting through the cacophony of battle. The mole rats regrouped near the edge of the chamber, their faces pale and their breaths labored. One of them cast a hesitant glance at Noah, their trust in their captain eroding with every passing second.
This isn't working,
they said, their voice trembling.
You're going to kill us!
Noah didn't respond. His focus was entirely on SCP-682, which had begun to move again, its movements slow but deliberate as it stalked the group. The suit chimed softly, a new stream of data flashing across Noah's visor. A storage tank on the far side of the chamber registered as volatile, filled with a concentrated acid strong enough to slow SCP-682's regeneration.
Cover me,
Noah ordered, leaving no room for argument. The mole rats reluctantly complied, their weapons lighting up the chamber with bursts of gunfire. SCP-682 roared, its massive head turning toward the team as it advanced on them. Noah moved quickly, the suit's enhanced speed allowing him to close the distance to the storage tank in seconds. He scanned the controls, the interface highlighting a manual release valve.
Get clear,
he shouted. The mole rats scattered, diving for cover as Noah twisted the valve. The tank ruptured with a deafening hiss, a torrent of acid spraying across the chamber and dousing SCP-682 in a searing wave. The creature let out an agonizing scream, its body convulsing as the acid ate away at its scaled hide. It thrashed wildly, its movements tearing through the chamber as the floor buckled further under its weight.
Move now,
Noah bellowed. The team regrouped at the far end of the chamber as SCP-682 writhed in the acid. For a moment, the creature stilled, its massive form collapsing into the steaming pool. The chamber fell silent, save for the faint hiss of acid eating away at the floor. Noah scanned the scene, his visor displaying faint signs of movement beneath the acid. SCP-682 wasn't dead. It couldn't be.
This won't hold it for long,
Noah said, his voice low. We need to keep moving. The mole rats didn't need to be told twice, rushing out of the chamber. Behind them, the acid began to ripple, faint growls echoing through the space as SCP-682 stirred once more. The team moved quickly, their boots pounding against the metal floor as they fled the ruined chamber. The acid-filled roars of SCP-682 filled their ears, growing louder with each passing second. The air in the corridor was sharp, with the acrid stench of burning flesh and metal, every breath a reminder of the monster they were leaving behind. Noah took the lead. His visor flickered with streams of data, escape routes, environmental scans, and the steadily increasing movement signature of SCP-682.
It's not staying down,
one of the mole rats said, their voice tight with panic. It won't, Noah replied, his tone flat. It never does. The corridor twisted and turned, the narrow space forcing the team into a single-file line. The silence was broken only by the occasional creaking of the facility's damaged structure. Ahead, Noah slowed as his visor highlighted a new danger. A section of the corridor where the floor had partially collapsed, leaving a jagged gap that descended into darkness. Jump, he ordered, not breaking his stride. The exhausted mole rats hesitated, one of them looking back down the corridor, their face pale as they heard the distant scrape of claws growing closer.
Move!
Noah barked, his voice sharp enough to jolt them into action. One by one, the mole rats leapt across the gap, their movements shaky but determined. Noah brought up the rear, his enhanced agility allowing him to clear the distance effortlessly. As they landed on the other side, a deafening crash echoed from the direction they had come. The corridor behind them shuddered violently, the walls groaning as SCP-682 barreled into view. It filled the space left behind by the mole rats, its scales glistening with acid burns that were already beginning to heal. The creature let out a roar that seemed to shake the very air, its glowing eyes locking onto the team.
Go!
Noah shouted, motioning for the mole rats to keep moving. The team surged forward, the narrow space forcing them into a frantic sprint. Behind them, SCP-682 tore through the corridor with reckless abandon, its claws raking against the walls as it charged. One of the mole rats stumbled, their foot catching on a loose piece of debris.
Help me!
They cried, their voice raw with fear. Another soldier skidded to a halt, reaching back to grab their fallen comrade. Noah turned, his visor flashing with proximity alerts as SCP-682 closed the distance. He raised his arm, the suit's combat systems activating in a burst of light. A pulse of energy shot toward the creature, striking its shoulder and forcing it to stagger.
Get up!
Noah ordered, his voice slicing through the chaos. The mole rats scrambled to their feet, their hands trembling as they pulled each other forward. SCP-682 roared again, the sound filling the narrow space as it shook off the attack and resumed its charge.
This way,
Noah called, leading the team down a side passage that appeared on his visor's map. The tunnel was narrower than the main corridor, its walls lined with exposed pipes and broken wiring. They pressed on, their movements frantic, as SCP-682's growls grew fainter behind them. The creature's massive size slowed it in the confined space, but the sound of its pursuit was a constant reminder that it was never far away. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, the air colder and the light dimmer. Noah scanned the space quickly, his visor highlighting a ventilation shaft near the far wall.
there.
He said, motioning toward the shaft. It's too small for it to follow. The mole rats didn't wait for further instruction. They climbed into the shaft one by one, pulling themselves through the narrow opening. Noah was the last to enter, his suit adjusting to the tight space as he moved forward. Behind him, SCP-682's growls grew louder as the creature reached the edge of the chamber. The shaft trembled as SCP-682 slammed against the walls, its claws scraping futilely against the metal. The team pressed on, the narrow passage forcing them into a slow crawl. Finally, the shaft opened into another corridor, this one quieter and less damaged. The mole rats tumbled out one by one, their bodies trembling from exhaustion and fear. Noah emerged last, his suit's glow illuminating the team's pale faces.
That thing, it doesn't stop,
one of the mole rats said, their voice trembling.
It never does,
Noah replied, his tone devoid of comfort. The team huddled close, their breaths hanging in the icy air. Behind them, guttural roars and shattering crashes of SCP-682's fury rang out, each sound a chilling reminder of the danger stalking them.
We're not gonna make it out of here,
another mole rat said, their voice breaking.
Not with him leading us.
Noah turned sharply, his gaze locking onto the speaker. You have a problem with my leadership? Say it now, he said, his voice icy. The room fell silent, the tension between them thick enough to cut. No one spoke. Move out, Noah said, turning back to the map on his visor. The team pressed into the control center, its hollowed remains a testament to the chaos that had unfolded. Broken terminals sparked in the dim light, while exposed wiring dangled like frayed nerves from the walls. The mole rats spread out cautiously, scanning for any threats lurking in the gloom. Noah moved towards a half-functional terminal at the far end of the room. His suit's glow reflected off the cracked screen, and as he leaned closer, the interface came alive, connecting with a soft hum.
What are we even looking for?
One of the mole rats murmured, their voice tight with frustration. Another shrugged, keeping their focus on the surroundings.
Something you won't bother explaining,
they said bitterly, jerking their head toward Noah. Noah ignored them, his attention locked on the data streaming into his visor. The suit's systems worked quickly, bypassing layers of encryption and unpacking fragmented files. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, but to Noah, they weren't random. They were the beginnings of a story, one he wasn't sure he wanted to hear. Behind him, one of the mole rats shifted uncomfortably, their eyes narrowing as they watched him work. Captain, they started, their tone cautious. Whatever you're doing, we deserve to know what it is. The hum of the suit grew faintly louder as Noah accessed a new layer of files, but he didn't look up. "You'll know when I do," he replied. The tension between him and the team deepened. A few of the mole rats scowled, their unease brewing into something more volatile. The terminal screen flickered, and then the fragments began to coalesce into something coherent. Logs appeared, incident reports, directives, encrypted memos. The first entries were familiar accounts of SCP-682's transport and containment, details of its relentless aggression and repeated escape attempts. But the further Noah delved, the more the focus shifted. Mentions of SCP-610 surfaced, the outbreak, the containment failures, the staggering loss of life. The words on the screen grew colder, more clinical, as they detailed the infection's spread. Noah's visor highlighted a specific log, a communication marked with a high-priority encryption seal. As the suit decoded it, a name surfaced, 05-2. Behind him, the mole rats continued their search, but their movements were slower now, weighed down by their unease. One of them paused, glancing towards Noah. He noticed his fists were clenched. "Find anything?" they asked, though the edge in their tone suggested they weren't sure they wanted the answer. For a moment, Noah didn't reply. The suit fed him more information, piecing together a chilling narrative. The infection hadn't just been contained poorly, it had been unleashed. The memos referenced controlled testing parameters and calculated escalations, all approved by the O5 Council. The word sacrifice appeared repeatedly, framed in cold, detached language. "This wasn't an accident," Noah said quietly. The team froze, the weight of his words settling over them like a thick fog. "What do you mean?" one of them asked, their voice low. Noah turned, his visor glowing faintly as he faced the team. The outbreak, the infection, it was deliberate. The room fell into an uneasy silence. One of the mole rats clenched their jaw, their hands tightening on their weapon. "You're telling me someone let that thing loose? On purpose?" Noah nodded once, his movements mechanical. "They authorized everything. Spread, the losses, all of it." The team stiffened, the weight of his words sinking in. Another mole rat took a cautious step forward, their face pale. "You're saying they let this happen?" The logs on Noah's visor scrolled faster as he delved deeper. "They didn't just let this happen," he said. "They planned it. They monitored its spread, documented the losses. They called it necessary escalation." The words lingered in the air as the relentless hum of the servers droned on in the background. One of the mole rats let out a bitter laugh, shaking their head. "You've got to be kidding me. Who the hell signed off on that?" Noah's voice dropped, cold and certain. 05-2. The name landed like a bomb. The team stared at him with disbelief and growing anger. "And what now?" a mole rat asked, their voice trembling. "We're just supposed to go after one of the most powerful people in the Foundation? How does that end for us?" Noah turned back to the terminal, his visor flashing with new information. "This isn't about how it ends for us," he said. "It's about making them answer for this." Another soldier's jaw tightened, their anger finally boiling over. "You're asking us to follow you on a mission for what? Revenge?" Noah didn't respond immediately. The files highlighted a secure exit route, a transport elevator that led to the surface. He pointed toward the map on the terminal. "There's an elevator at the end of the next corridor. It'll get us topside." The soldier narrowed their eyes, their distrust spilling over. "And then what? March straight to 05-2 and hope they don't kill us all?" Noah finally turned to face them fully, his voice steady. "We've seen what they're capable of. Do you really think staying quiet is the answer?" The soldier fell silent, their lips pressed into a thin line. The team looked at each other. As much as they distrusted Noah, the alternative was unthinkable. Reluctantly, the mole rats gathered their gear, their faces etched with the weight of the revelation. Silently, they fell into step behind Noah as he led them out of the server room and back into the shadowy corridors beyond. "The south entrance," Noah murmured. The facility loomed ahead, an imposing monolith of steel and reinforced concrete veiled in the swirling snowstorm. Floodlights swept the perimeter in slow arcs, their harsh glow slicing through the white haze to reveal the outlines of barbed wire fences and the ominous silhouettes of automated turrets. Minimal patrols, automated defenses only. Noah stated. Behind him, the mole rats waited in tense silence, their breaths drifting in the icy air. One of the mole rats shifted uneasily, their eyes darting between the facility and their leader. That's if your fancy suit's right, they muttered. Noah didn't look back, his focus fixed on the data streaming across his visor. The comment hung in the air, unanswered. The team began moving, their steps deliberate as they advanced towards the southern perimeter. The snow muffled their footfalls, but the faint crunch beneath their boots still felt deafening against the silence. As they got closer, Noah raised a hand, signaling a halt. His visor had detected tripwires hidden beneath the snow, their faint energy signatures barely perceptible. "Tripwires," he said, pointing towards the ground. "Stay close and follow my path." The mole rats exchanged uneasy looks before nodding. Their movements became more cautious, their steps more deliberate as they followed Noah through the maze of invisible traps. The low hum of the facility's automated defenses grew louder as they approached. Turrets perched along the walls swept the area with mechanical precision, their lenses glowing faintly as they scanned for movement. Noah crouched behind a pile of debris, his visor mapping the turret's patterns. The faint shimmer of his suit's energy field pulsed softly as it calculated a safe path. "We move on my mark," Noah said, his tone steady. The mole rats tensed, their weapons held tightly as they waited. "Mark," he whispered. They moved in unison, darting between the scanning beams with a precision born of necessity. Each movement was calculated, each pause timed perfectly. The turrets swiveled with unsettling speed, their sensors brushing dangerously close to detecting the group. Reaching the entrance, they pressed themselves against the steel door, their breaths coming in short, sharp bursts. Noah worked quickly, his suit interfacing with the control panel. The door emitted a faint click before sliding open with a low hiss. "Inside," Noah ordered, stepping through the threshold. The mole rats followed in a tight formation, their boots clanging heavily against the metal floor as they entered the dimly lit corridor. The door sealed behind them, muffling the howl of the storm outside. The air was cold and stale, carrying the faint metallic tang of machinery. The corridor stretched ahead in an unbroken line, its walls lined with exposed pipes and wires. One of the mole rats scanned their surroundings, their voice low. "Doesn't look like the kind of place you'd expect to house someone like 05-2. Noah didn't respond. He was too busy scanning for hidden threats. The glow of his suit cast distorted shadows on the walls, giving the space an unsettling aura. "The real defenses are deeper inside," he said finally. The group moved cautiously, their weapons raised as they advanced through the winding passageways. Each turn felt more oppressive than the last, the silence amplifying every creak and groan of the facility's aging infrastructure. Rounding a corridor, they came upon a security checkpoint. A row of sleek humanoid sentries stood motionless, their heads bowed as if in sleep. The hum of their systems was the only indication of their dormant state. Noah raised a hand, signaling the team to stop. "Automated sentries," he said quietly. "Can't we disable them?" whispered a mole rat. Noah waved a hand. "It'll trigger an alert." The mole rat frowned, their grip tightening on their weapon. "So, what's the play?" "We bypass them," Noah replied steadily. The faint shimmer of his suit's stealth system activated as he moved forward, his form blending seamlessly with the shadows. The sentries didn't stir as he approached, their scanners unable to detect his presence. Noah motioned for the team to follow, guiding them through the checkpoint with deliberate precision. The mole rats moved carefully, their breaths shallow as they passed dangerously close to the sentries. One soldier stumbled, their boots scraping lightly against the metal floor. A sound so faint it barely rose above the hum of the corridor, yet it was enough. A soft click echoed as the sentry scanners roared to life, casting beams across each of their shoulders. "Don't move," Noah commanded through gritted teeth. The team froze, their muscles taut as the beams hovered over them. The seconds passed agonizingly slowly, but then the lights flickered off and the sentries returned to their dormant state. The mole rats exhaled shakily before following Noah into the next chamber. The room was larger, its walls lined with monitors displaying streams of encrypted data. At the far end, a central control terminal pulsed, its screen casting a soft glow across the otherwise dark space. Noah approached the terminal, his movements purposeful. The suit's interface hummed as it connected, decrypting the system with mechanical efficiency. One of the mole rats lingered near the doorway, their weapon raised. "You think we'll find 05-2's location in here?" Noah didn't look up from the terminal. If they're in this facility, this terminal will tell us where. The soldier frowned, but said nothing more. The reflection of the central terminal cast eerie shadows across Noah's face, as the mechanical whir of decrypting files filled the room. Finally, the terminal chimed softly, and Noah's visor flickered with new information. His suit projected a map of the facility, highlighting a heavily secured area at its core. "They're in there," Noah said, flat but certain. He motioned towards the holographic display, which marked the path to the sanctum in pulsing red. One of the mole rats stepped forward cautiously, their eyes scanning the map. "What kind of defenses are we talking about?" "The sanctum is locked behind triple reinforced barriers," Noah replied. "Automated sentries, electrified corridors, and biometric scanners." Another soldier let out a low whistle, shaking their head. "Sounds like we're walking into a death trap." Noah turned to face them, his visor's glow making his expression unreadable. "Not if we're fast and precise." The mole rats exchanged wary glances, but nodded reluctantly. They moved out quickly, navigating the twisting corridors with renewed urgency. The map in Noah's visor guided their every step, marking potential threats and hidden passages as they approached the sanctum. The first barrier came into view, a checkpoint guarded by sleek humanoid sentries. Their frames were unnervingly still, their eyes glowing as they scanned the room with deliberate precision. "Stealth systems," Noah said, activating the faint shimmer of his suit's cloaking field. "Follow my path. Step where I step." The team moved cautiously, their movements exact as they weaved through the sentries' scanning arcs. Noah led the way, his visor calculating each step with unerring accuracy. One of the mole rats stumbled, their foot brushing against a loose pile of debris. The sentries nearest to them twitched, its head snapping towards the noise. "Freeze!" Noah ordered. The team stood perfectly still as the sentry scanner swept over them. The air felt suffocating, the tension thick enough to choke. After a moment, the sentry returned to its dormant state, its head swiveling back to its original position. The team exhaled softly, their movements even more deliberate as they cleared the checkpoint. The final door loomed ahead, larger and more imposing. Its surface was etched with the Foundation's insignia, and its edges glowed faintly with an unnatural light. Noah scanned the door, his visor displaying a complex lock mechanism that contained biometric data with encrypted access codes. "This is it," he said, stepping forward. One of the mole rats frowned, their voice tinged with disbelief. "You really think we're going to waltz through that thing?" Noah didn't respond, his focus entirely on the lock. His suit's systems hummed as they interfaced with the panel, streams of data racing across his visor. The process was slower this time, the security measures more advanced than anything they had encountered so far. The mole rats shifted uneasily, their eyes darting between Noah and the corridor behind them. "This better work," one of them muttered under their breath, their voice low and edged with doubt as they shook their head. The door let out a low, mechanical groan before sliding open, revealing the sanctum beyond. The air inside was colder, tinged with the sterile scent of antiseptic. The room was stark and unwelcoming, its walls lined with monitors displaying streams of encrypted data. At the center of the room stood a figure cloaked in shadow, their posture composed despite the intrusion. As the dim light from the screens bled across their face, revealing the cold, calculating gaze of 05-2. Noah stepped inside, his movements deliberate, focused. The mole rats followed cautiously, their weapons raised but their hands trembling. 05-2's voice cut through the silence, smooth and unyielding. "So, you've finally made it. I was beginning to wonder." 05-2 stepped forward, their silhouettes sharp against the cold light of the monitors. They were clad in a tailored black uniform, the insignia of the Foundation subtly embroidered on their chest. Their expression was calm, almost amused, as they regarded Noah and the mole rats with detached curiosity. Noah stood at the forefront, the hum of his suit the only sound in the tense silence. His visor scanned the room, analyzing every detail. The sanctum was minimalist, yet fortified, its reinforced walls and advanced technology signaling the immense power and resources of its occupant. 05-2's voice was smooth, laced with quiet authority. "You've come a long way, Captain. Impressive, considering the odds." One of the mole rats shifted uneasily, their weapon trained on 05-2. "You're the one behind this," they muttered, their tone filled with barely restrained anger. 05-2 tilted their heads slightly, their gaze flicking to the soldier before returning to Noah.
Behind this, a narrow perspective. But I suppose you've seen enough to think you know the truth. Noah took a step forward, his tone cold. We know you let the infection spread. You orchestrated everything, the outbreaks, the losses, all for what? To see how much devastation SCP-610 could cause? The faintest smile tugged at 05-2's lips. It's always fascinating watching soldiers piece together fragments of a larger picture, but you're not entirely wrong. The mole rats exchanged tense glances, their grips tightening on their weapons. You sacrifice entire populations, Noah continued, his voice rising. You weaponized SCP-610 like it was just another tool in your arsenal, and you called it necessary. 05-2 remained composed, their hands clasped behind their back. Necessary is a word that implies choice, Captain. This was never about choice. It was about survival. Silence blanketed the room, the weight of 05-2's words settling over the group. Survival? One of the mole rats repeated, their voice filled with disbelief. 05-2's gaze shifted, their eyes narrowing slightly. Innocence is a luxury in our line of work. Every decision we make, every action we take is weighted against the greater threat. You've seen what SCP-610 can do, but you haven't seen what's coming. Noah's visor flared red with faint warnings as the suit picked up subtle shifts in the room's atmosphere. His voice was steady but sharp. What are you talking about? 05-2 took a step closer, their presence commanding despite the tension in the air. The infection is just a piece of the puzzle, a test, if you will, to prepare us for something far worse. The anomaly we face isn't some mindless disease or rampaging monster. It is intelligent, it is adaptable, and it is coming. The mole rats stiffened, their unease growing. Noah clenched his fists, the suit amplifying the motion. You expect us to believe this? That the ends justify the means? That the lives you've destroyed were worth it because of some vague threat? 05-2's expression hardened, their calm demeanor giving way to a flicker of intensity. You don't have to believe me, Captain, but the data does not lie. They gestured toward the monitors, where encrypted files and distorted images flashed rapidly. What you see here is just the beginning. SCP-610 was a controlled escalation, a necessary sacrifice to evaluate our readiness. One of the mole rats shook their head, their brow furrowed with anger. 05-2 met their gaze. Would you rather we face extinction unprepared? Noah's visor scanned the data on the monitors. Fragments of images and logs painted a grim picture. Cities consumed by infection, creatures far worse than SCP-610 wreaking havoc, entire regions falling to chaos. The gravity of the situation pressed down on everyone. Noah finally spoke, his voice cold but deliberate. You made a choice for everyone else. You decided who lived and who died, and you think that makes you a savior? 05-2's lips curled into a faint smile. A glint flickered in their eyes, a spark of something unreadable. No, Captain. It makes me a realist. Someone had to make the hard decisions. You're just upset because it wasn't you. The tension in the room reached a breaking point. Emotions were rising. The mole rats exchanged glances, their trust in Noah faltering even further as the implications of 05-2's words settled in. Noah's fists clenched, his knuckles paling as a storm of rage simmered beneath the surface. The dim light from the monitors spread across the room, casting sharp shadows on 05-2's impassive face. You don't get to decide who lives and who dies, Noah said, his voice low but sharp, cutting through the oppressive silence. 05-2's expression did not change, but there was a slight, almost pitying tilt to their head. They regarded Noah as though he were a soldier, still struggling to understand the bigger picture. And yet someone always does, they replied evenly. One of the mole rats shifted uneasily, their fingers hovering over the trigger of their weapon. The weight of the statement was suffocating, a truth they did not want to confront. The monitors behind 05-2 flashed again, this time displaying fragmented data. Cities consumed by infection, fields littered with bodies, and the relentless spread of SCP-610. The grim images punctuated the silence. Noah advanced a step, his suit hummed with readiness. You weaponized SCP-610, he said, his tone sharp. Turn the world into a testing ground. You call it survival, but all I see is mass murder. 05-2 folded their hands behind their back, their calm demeanor a stark contrast to the simmering anger in the room. SCP-610 was never about destruction, they said, gesturing towards the screens. It was about preparation. Every outbreak, every loss, it was data. Without it, we would not be ready for what's coming. The mole rats went stiff with dread. What could be worse than this? 05-2 turned towards the monitors, their fingers gliding across the controls. The images shifted to grainy footage of barren landscapes, towering anomalies, and cities collapsing under unimaginable forces. It is intelligent, 05-2 said, their voice carrying a weight that stilted the air. It's adaptive. SCP-610 was only a shadow of what's coming. The data we've gathered is the only reason we have a fighting chance. An uneasy silence washed over the room. One of the mole rats shook their head, their voice taut with disbelief. So you're saying all of this, every life lost, was worth it? Because of some vague doomsday prophecy? 05-2 turned back to the group, their gaze locking onto the soldier. Not prophecy, they corrected. Projections. Data does not lie. The mole rats stiffened, their frustration boiling just beneath the surface. And what happens if you're wrong? What if all this suffering was for nothing? Noah's visor glowed as he analyzed the footage on the screens. The fragmented images painted a picture too grim to dismiss, but the weight of 05-2's decisions pressed harder on his chest than any threat. They didn't prepare for survival, he said finally, his voice cutting through the tension. They prepared for control. 05-2's gaze shifted to Noah, their faint smile tinged with something darker. Control is survival, Captain. Without it, humanity would devour itself before the real threat even arrives. Their mole rats exchanged more uneasy glances, their trust in Noah continuing to falter as 05-2's words sank in. Noah stepped closer, his movements deliberate, his voice sharp. You don't get to make that call. You don't get to play God with billions of lives. 05-2 held his gaze, their expression unreadable. Someone has to, they said quietly. Would you prefer it to be you? The words hit hard, rippling through the group like a shockwave. One of the mole rats lowered their weapon slightly, their breath hitching as they glanced at Noah. Another soldier's voice broke the silence, trembling with anger. And what are we to you? More pieces on your board? Another experiment to write off if it fails? 05-2's gaze swept over the group, their calm facade unshaken. You're soldiers. You've always been tools of someone else's design. But now you've been given a glimpse of the truth. That makes you valuable, for now. The chill in their tone cut through the room, leaving the mole rats visibly shaken. Noah's voice rose steady and defiant. This ends here. Whatever game you're playing, it's over. 05-2's faint smile returned, their eyes narrowing slightly. You think you've won because you've made it this far? You've only just begun to see the scope of what's at stake. The hum of the monitors grew louder. Their mechanical pulsing resonated through the walls like a low, ominous drumbeat. The air seemed to vibrate with it, pressing against Noah's chest. 05-2 remained composed, their hands clasped behind their back, but the flicker in their eyes betrayed something darker, anticipation. I warned you, Captain, 05-2 said softly. This isn't a fight you can win. The walls around them groaned, pulsating faintly as if awakening from a long slumber. The monitors crackled and fizzed, their images dissolving into static before the chamber itself began to shift. Noah steadied himself, his visor scanning the rapidly changing environment. The floor warped beneath his boots, slick with a fleshy, pulsating substance. The sterile walls were replaced by grotesque organic structures, twisted sinew and tendrils spreading outward like veins. Behind him, the mole rats stumbled back, their weapons raised as the room transformed into a living nightmare. One of them swore under their breath, their voice tight with fear. What the hell is this? 05-2 raised a hand, and the tendrils responded, weaving together into towering, grotesque shapes. You wanted to stop me, Captain, they said. Now you'll see what you're truly up against. From the shadows, infected entities emerged, grotesque amalgamations of flesh and bone, their forms barely recognizable as human. Their guttural moans filled the air, their movements jerky and unnatural as they converged on the team. Contact! One of the mole rats roared, opening fire. The gunfire echoed through the chamber, the bullets tearing into the infected but barely slowing their advance. Noah's visor highlighted the infected, marking weak points as his suit powered up. The interface fed him tactical suggestions, but he ignored them, relying instead on instinct and experience. Captain! One of the mole rats yelled, their voice strained. What's the plan? Noah didn't answer. His focus was locked on 05-2. The council members stood at the center of the chaos, their calm demeanor unshaken as the infected swarmed the room. Hold them off, Noah said finally, his voice sharp. 05-2 is mine. The mole rats exchanged uncertain glances, hesitation flickering in their eyes. But with a nod of silent resolve, they obeyed, their weapons erupting in deafening roars as they unleashed a relentless barrage, struggling to hold back the surge of infected clawing toward them. Noah charged forward, his suit systems humming with energy. The tendrils lashed out at him, but the suit's reflex enhancers activated, allowing him to dodge with inhuman precision. 05-2 raised their arms, and the chamber shifted again, the walls closing in, forming a maze of twisting corridors that pulsated with life. You think that you can reach me? They said, their voice echoing through the distorted space. You can't even comprehend what I've become. Noah's visor mapped the shifting environment, highlighting paths that opened and closed in rapid succession. He moved swiftly, navigating the maze with calculated precision. Behind him, the mole rats struggled to hold their ground. The infected swarmed in waves, their grotesque forms tearing through the team's defenses. We're getting overrun! One of the soldiers yelled, their voice cracking with desperation. Another mole rat, their face pale with determination, stepping forward. Go! They shouted, shoving the others toward a narrow opening. I'll cover you! The soldier threw a grenade into the mass of infected, the explosion ripping through the horde and buying the team precious seconds. The sacrifice was immediate. Tendrils lashed out, pulling the mole rats into the swarm as their screams echoed through the chamber. No! Another mole rat cried, their voice raw with anguish. Keep moving! Someone shouted, dragging them forward. Noah pressed on, his focus unyielding. He reached the heart of the maze where 05-2 waited, their presence radiating an unnatural calm. You're persistent, 05-2 said, their tone almost amused. But persistence without understanding is futile. Noah didn't respond. The suit's energy pulsed around him, and he lunged, aiming a precise strike at 05-2. The council member raised a hand, and the tendrils coiled around them, forming a shield that absorbed the impact. Do you see now, Captain? They said, their voice resonating with an otherworldly cadence. This is what control looks like. Noah's visor recalibrated, scanning for vulnerabilities. The suit systems fed him data, highlighting the points where the tendrils connected to 05-2's body. Control? Noah said, his voice sharp. This isn't control. It's a cancer. He struck again, this time targeting the tendrils. The suit's augmented strength tore the organic shield, sending fragments of flesh and sinew splattering across the chamber with a sickening wet slap. 05-2 staggered, their calm facade cracking for the first time. You don't understand, they said, their voice laced with fury. Without this, humanity has no future! Noah advanced, his movements relentless. Humanity doesn't need you to save it, he said coldly. It needs you to stop. The battle raged on, the chamber shuddering with every clash. Behind him, the mole rats fought desperately to survive. Their trust in Noah fractured, but their will to live unyielding. The tide of infected surged again, but Noah did not waver. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a reckoning. The chamber pulsed with life, its grotesque walls shuddering in time with 05-2's commands. Tendrils lashed out like living weapons, slicing through the air as Noah darted between them, his suit's reflex enhancers pushing his body to its limits. Each strike from 05-2 reshaped the battlefield, the infected flesh weaving into new barriers and traps. You're out of your depth, Captain, 05-2 said, their voice reverberating around the shifting maze. This infection is my domain. You can't win. Noah didn't respond. His focus was absolute, his visor analyzing every movement, every shift in the environment. The suit's systems fed him a constant stream of data, highlighting weak points in the tendrils, and tracking the ebb and flow of SCP-5000's influence. A massive tendril slammed into the ground behind him, sending a spray of viscous liquid into the air. Noah dodged, his movements fluid as he countered with a strike of his own. The suit amplified his strength, his fists smashing through the writhing mass and severing its connection to the wall. 05-2 staggered slightly, their composure faltering as the infection recoiled.
You think brute force will save you?
They spat, their voice edged with fury.
This isn't just an anomaly. It is evolution.
Noah's visor flickered, highlighting a network of glowing veins running through the walls and converging at the chamber's core. The infection pulsed with energy, its connection to 05-2 visible as a shimmering web. It was a weakness, a point of control that could be severed. The mole rat's distant gunfire echoed through the chamber, the sound punctuated by the guttural cries of the infected. They were holding their ground, but their strength was waning. Another wave of tendrils surged toward Noah, their movements erratic and desperate as 05-2 fought to maintain control. Noah activated the suit's adaptive combat systems, their interface recalibrating in real time. His next move was calculated and precise, targeting the tendrils where they connected to the infection's core. Each strike disrupted the web further, the chamber quaking with every severed link.
You're weakening,
Noah said coldly, his voice amplified by the suit.
This infection doesn't belong to you. It's consuming you.
05-2's eyes blazed with fury.
You don't understand,
they snarled, their voice cracking.
This is bigger than you, bigger than all of us. You're destroying the only chance humanity has to survive.
Noah didn't hesitate. He lunged toward the core, his suit glowing with energy as he unleashed a devastating blow. The impact sent shockwaves rippling through the chamber, the web of infection unraveling in a cascade of light and sound. 05-2 screamed, their body convulsing as the connection to SCP-610 was severed. The tendrils writhed uncontrollably before collapsing, their grotesque forms disintegrating into ash. The chamber fell silent, the pulsing walls fading into inert, lifeless flesh. Noah approached 05-2, their once commanding presence reduced to a trembling figure crumpled on the ground. Their breathing was labored, their eyes bloodshot as they looked up at him.
You don't know what you've done,
05-2 rasped, their voice barely audible. Noah's visor scanned 05-2's vitals. They were fading fast, their connection to SCP-610 taking its toll. It's over, he said evenly. 05-2 coughed weakly, a bitter smile curling at the edge of their lips.
You think this was about winning? About me? No, Captain. This was always about what's coming.
Noah's jaw tightened. What's coming? He demanded. 05-2's gaze turned distant, their eyes glinting with something between fear and resignation.
You stopped one infection, they murmured. But the real threat, it's been watching, waiting. SCP-610 was a test, a distraction.
Noah leaned closer, his voice sharp.
What is it? What's coming?
05-2's body convulsed, their strength waning as they drew a ragged breath.
Something worse,
they whispered.
Something that can't be stopped. And when it arrives...
The 05 council members' eyes closed, their body going still as their final breath escaped. The glow of the infection faded entirely, leaving the chamber dark and cold. Behind Noah, the mole rats regrouped, their faces pale and their bodies battered. They looked at him with a mixture of awe and fear, their trust in him hanging by a thread. Noah straightened, his visor scanning the room one last time. He turned to his team, his voice hollow.
We're done here. Let's move out.
The mole rats glanced at one another hesitantly. They didn't want to follow him, and yet one by one they followed Noah out of the chamber, their boots crunching through the lifeless remains of the infection. The mole rats staggered out of the facility, the frigid wind hitting them like a wall. The icy wasteland stretched endlessly before them, a desolate expanse under an ashen sky. Noah led the way, his posture rigid, the glow of the suit casting long shadows across the snow. The team regrouped a few paces behind him, their movements slow and labored. They were bloodied, battered, and fewer when they had entered. One of the mole rats crouched, tending to a wounded teammate whose breath came in short, shallow bursts. Another soldier stood apart, staring at Noah back with a mixture of fear and resentment.
That suit,
they muttered under their breath.
What's it really doing to him?
No one answered. Noah stopped at the edge of a low ridge, his visor scanning the horizon. The suit's systems hummed softly. He raised his hand, and a holographic interface came to life before him. Encrypted files, distorted images, and corrupted audio clips filled the screen, pieces of a puzzle that refused to come together. Noah's jaw tightened as he sifted through the files. The O5's words echoed in his mind, their final warning searing into his thoughts like a brand.
Something worse. Something that can't be stopped.
One file caught his attention, a fragmentary recording. The audio crackled as a distorted voice emerged. Projected anomaly, global impact, survival rate, negligible. The recording cut off abruptly, leaving only static. Noah clenched his fists, the glow of the suit flaring briefly before dimming. The more he uncovered, the less certain he became. Every answer raised another question, every revelation another doubt. Noah lowered his hand, the holographic display fading into the cold air. He stood still at the edge of the ridge, staring into the void. A question gnawed at him. Had he saved humanity, or had he doomed it?